Hello, YouTube. Hang on a second while we bring those Twitch vagrants and malcontents in here, and we'll get this baby rolling. Everybody, welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and we've got two streams, not one, but two streams going simultaneously. My immediate thought as I mention this is that I'm reminded of what they said about twin-engine airplanes, and that is they're twice as likely to get an engine failure, so I suppose there's that. Speaking of airplanes, obviously every commercial jet, twin-engine commercial jet is certified for be able to take off at full loading under worst conditions, get up high enough, circle around, so even if you lose an engine on the most critical part of the flight, you're fine. But the twin-engine piston airplanes, on the other hand, like the old Baron and things like that, not so much. You had to fly those things perfectly. If you lost an engine, and even if you did, you'd have a climb rate of maybe 150, 200 feet per minute. And that's where that expression, that second engine is there to fly you to the scene of the accident, comes from. So anyway, that's our airplane talk for the day, and thanks for joining us. So everybody have a great night, and we will see you next time right here on Stratosphere. Okay, so it's good to be here, and it is the 5th of October. That part I can believe. That's the 2023 that always gives me so much problem. Oh, there's a clever line from Ace Effendi, sorry. You may say I'm a streamer, but I'm not the only one. Ooh, clever. Well played, sir or madam. Yes, so we usually start the show with a little story time, and sometimes I don't have anything to say, which is, I don't know, this is show number 470, I guess, something. And I think that's happened twice, 370. So we're still waiting for John, who's in Europe. He'll be back at the end of the month, and I'm hoping to get Gary Sinise before then. And this is just my little story time here. Now that I got a chance to drop a few more names, so Gary is apparently now he's safe in America with his family, and in the state of Tennessee area. And so there was another going away event for him not too long ago. My wife and I, beautiful Natasha, went, and this was a little different because afterwards there was only 12 or 15 of us in a room. I got to meet Dennis Quaid, by the way, who I'd never met before, and it was good to see him there. And as he was leaving, I would like to have had this be a little more of a natural conversation, but he was leaving a little bit early, and as he was leaving, I kind of intercepted him at the edge of this, kind of this back room where we were having this event. And I said, hey, I just wanted to tell you, Breaking Away changed my life. For those of you who've never seen it, Breaking Away is highly, highly, highly recommended film. It's Dennis Quaid's first movie. And it's the movie that convinced me that you could make movies that didn't cost $200 million and necessarily had to be about spaceships and stuff. I just loved that film. So I said, I just wanted to tell you, Dennis, since I got the chance, Breaking Away really changed my life. And he looked at me and said, mine too. And I thought, well, there you go. That's a nice thing to say. Anyway, so here's the point of the happy story hour. So for the first time ever, the person who kind of put this last sort of farewell dinner together said, we've all been talking and known each other for 15 years and sitting in these small rooms, but I don't think anyone's ever had a chance to just, sit down and ask you, Gary, just some questions about things, and I thought it'd be fun to do that. So, okay. And I'm thinking, don't steal my show now. Nat, don't do it. But we talked about a bunch of things. He talked about Lieutenant Dan and a bunch of things I'd like to cover with him too. However, when he got asked the question, name 3 people, living or dead, he'd like to have dinner with, I was rather surprised. I actually don't remember who the first 2 were, but I remember certainly who the third one was. He said, somebody. He said, somebody. And then he said, and Jimmy Doolittle. And I said, oh, Gary, have I got something for you? I told him about the America's Forgotten Heroes episode on that, and I told him I'd send him a link to the thing, but he apparently knew the story really well. I wanted a couple details, and he just looked really fascinated. So I got finally was able to get, not that they wouldn't give it to me earlier, I was finally smart enough to ask for a kind of a resume copy of all the stuff I've done for Daily Wire so I can show it to individuals and, brag on it. So I told him I'd send him the Jimmy Doolittle episode for America's Forgotten Heroes, and parenthetically inside the brackets, so I suppose it'd be brackets and then parenthetically, the America's Forgotten Heroes, I just really, really loved the title of the episode format. For some reason, I just loved it. So I could just call it Frank Luke, Jimmy Doolittle. It just seemed a little flat to me. So Frank Luke draws his firearm. John Paul Jones sails home from the war. Booker T. Washington takes the late train. Dick Rutan breaks a promise to his brother. And for the Jimmy Doolittle show, the show title was Jimmy Doolittle Releases the Brakes. And so I got the audio file, and I listened to it. I haven't heard it since we did it in 2020 or 21, I think. And then as I was listening to it, I thought, I was very pleased with it, obviously, but I thought, man, this just seems a little thin to me, And I remember all of those America's Forgotten Heroes shows I had to cut significantly, and I just didn't remember how much. The version that was aired, we haven't done the video of that, although that has been not only discussed but agreed to. We're going to shoot America's Forgotten Heroes as a video series somewhere in here. I had to get it they wanted it less than an hour, which meant about 8,000, 9,000 words, somewhere in that general vicinity. And so I listened to the one that we recorded, and I thought, I seem to remember being more to it than this. What did I cut? So I went and looked at the last version of the script that I wrote prior to having to cut it, and it wasn't 8,000 or 9,000 words. It was 27,000 words. So I wrote, so the version that aired was a third of what I wrote. And I thought that everything in the 27,000 word version was really, really, really good, if I do say so myself. So then I spent about, 4, 5, 6 hours, I guess, formatting that 28,000 word thing, because there were typos in there, and you need to italicize the names of the airplanes and all the rest of that stuff. And I sent that as well and said, look, I don't know if you got time to read this. I don't even have time to listen to the audio one, but if you do, because I know you're interested in it, it's not only a great story, it's just a great movie. It's just a great movie. And when I read the thing that I'd written years ago now, I was really quite shocked at how much detail, how deep I was able to dive into that story, and I guess in all the rest of them, because I took a look at what happened to every single one of those guys, and the amazing thing about the Doolittle raid is the entire story up until where they come off the deck of the Hornet and then start bombing Tokyo. That's an incredible movie, but that's not actually the story. The real story is what happened to four of the crews after that. What they went through is unbelievable, and again, it's like the Frank Luke thing, which I'll get to in just a second. It's just so good. The historical reality is so good that if you changed anything, you'd make it worse. You couldn't add to that story and improve it. It's just you can't do it. Eric says, how old was Jimmy Doolittle during the war? I want to say he was in his 40s, 41, 42 or something when he did the raid. He was twice as old as the youngest guys on there. But the reason I bring this up is I'd like very much, there have been just, echoes back and forth with Daily Wire of putting out a, print version of these things. And I had forgotten how much great stuff we had to cut. I remember when I was cutting John Paul Jones, I realized that I'd written 4 times, not 3 times as much. I had written 4 times as much, and there's just no way to cut this thing. I don't know how to cut it. So I didn't cut it. I just went through it and took out, copied and pasted the stuff that absolutely had to be in there, glued that onto a new file, and finally got it around, 9,000 words. But every one of those America's Forgotten Heroes things, which I'm very, very proud of, is about a third of the story. And the stuff that I cut wasn't filler. It was just really, really good. So I'd like to see all those things happen. So now I've got about 7 or 8 days to finish this Frank Luke script. So there's a chance I'll be canceling Monday night and Thursday night next week. A chance. I'm not saying yes, I'm saying possibly. Only because I'm about to go into, hibernation mode on these things, which is where I just kind of sleep on the couch and just finish this thing. So that Frank Luke story is, again, you can't improve on it. And I'm actually having a little bit of conflict on this, which I'll share with you, even though this is, generally you might say Monday night. So, by the way, about Monday night, I'm sorry I didn't post a message saying we couldn't do the show. I was just really, really exhausted, and by the time I took a little nap, forgot to set my alarm, but by the time I woke up, it was 6:35 or something, and I just missed it. So I'm sorry if I kept any of you who watch the live shows hanging around for nothing. I genuinely feel bad about that. So anyway, I'm so determined, to keep this thing authentic that I find myself actually almost reluctant to write a dramatic scene that I don't have documentation for. And I'll give you a great example of this. It's and this has been holding me up a little bit. I kind of have to shake myself loose on this because we got the book rights to The Stand, which is a historical look at Frank Luke's final flight, and an incredibly in-depth, detailed book. It's a huge book, and it's a great book. I got most of my factual material from that. And so I have an obligation, to the guy who wrote The Stand as well. So thank you, Sad Wings. Oh, my Lord, man. Sad Wings raging for, or just says Sad Wings, because it's abbreviated. $200 super chat with no question. I can't tell you how much that means to me. I'm very, very grateful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very, very much. This is where the thing has to become a movie, because basically what he did was he wrote a mystery story. Historically, that last mission of Frank Luke has always been in dispute. As soon as he was killed, there's they started the story of how he jumped out of his airplane and started firing, advancing German squad, and there were 7 Germans lying there dead, and that's how I heard the story when I was a kid. And I told this guy when we were trying to convince him that we wanted to get the book rights that I was going to be true to this thing. So I am true to it because I could make that promise because the story's just that good. But the problem is, it's not a problem. It's my problem. My problem is that I'm so dedicated to getting every factual detail about this guy right that I'm actually hesitant to write the kind of fictional scenes that make it into a movie. And when I say fictional scenes, I'm not talking about anything that contradicts the historical record. It's just you have a historical record of what he did, where he was, but that's not the character. That's not a story. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. So here's what last scene I wrote. Here's what I know. I know that Frank Luke was a junior on the Phoenix high school team that won the state championship. And I also know that somewhere around his 16th year, somewhere around there, 15, 16, 17 years old, he and his friend Bill went out just go camping. And they were gone for 3 days. And they went out into the middle of the Arizona desert. And this was 1916. And they encountered a couple, 3 or 4 of these Navajo boys, basically teens. But these Navajo guys are not, they're not driving, Range Rovers out there. These are guys on the well, Steve Wood pretty much said it. Yeah, the river engines. That's what exactly were. And they were up on a rock, and this is the stuff we have historical documentation for. Frank Luke and his friend Bill Elder were out there, and they'd been camping. They'd been out for 3 days, and they have to cross this river, and this, flash floods that can happen in Arizona had really swelled this river. So Frank gets his horse across easily, and then Bill gets in there, and his horse goes down. He comes off the horse. He nearly drowns. Frank literally grabs him, pulls him out of the water. And then when they get to the other side, when they get to the other side, these Indian boys that had been mocking them, just mocking them openly, like cheered him because of his heroism. And that I know, that actually happened. So now my job is how do I start coloring this guy in enough so that by the time you get to the end of this movie, you give a damn about what happens to him. So I actually wrote 2 scenes, and I have to get a little bit more research done on one of them. One of the things that's important about Frank Luke is he was a very religious guy. He was a very devout Catholic, and very devout Catholic. And so I'm going to talk to Father McTeague, who I do his radio show called Stations of the Cross. He's a Catholic priest, and I'm going to ask him, some of you probably, in fact, I'd be amazed if somebody doesn't have the answer to this right now, but I'm going to ask him, what would an extraordinarily religious Catholic do? Is there anything he could do if he was out camping over a Sunday? Is I don't mean to be flip about it, but is there a little kit or something? Is it a little, can he do that? I know Buzz Aldrin, performed Mass on the Moon, or communion. I just don't get those right. And so I want to find out what he did, because I want to have him do that, because when he gets to France, he starts getting in, he's gambling, and he wins a fair amount of money. He's got nothing to do with it, so he goes to church, and in the collection bin he puts in $200 or something, which in 1918 is a ton of money. And then when he comes back the next time to bring his winnings in, the church has not got a little plate anymore. Now they got essentially got a big bucket for this cash from this Americans. This is all true stuff, right? So I'm going to have a scene where he's they're out there and they're looking at the stars at nighttime. They're camping out under the stars. And another thing that's interesting about Frank Luke is that one of his friends was an artist, and this guy Bill Elder, his best friend, was essentially a hunchback. He didn't hang around with jocks or people that were tougher than him. He had really smart friends and sensitive friends and so on. And so here's the scene that I thought would be a great scene, and I've written it, and it's going to stay. I'm not dumping it, but I still find myself going, yeah, can I really do that? So the other thing I know is that his uncle was in the Civil War, and we know a little bit about his parents and stuff. And so I've already, in this point in the movie, when he's about to go out on this ride, we've already seen him play football. We've already seen him do the flagpole thing. Actually, maybe we haven't seen that yet. But in any event, he and Bill Elders go out out for their 3-day trip, and they're on their horses, obviously. So Luke is on his horse, and his friend's on the horse, and they've got their pack up and everything. They're getting ready to go, and his father's there, and his mother's there, and it essentially says, okay, well, all right, Dad, or Pop, I guess I'm all set to go. So, could I get the Colt again? And Dad says, actually, no, Frank, you're not getting your uncle's Colt. You got your .22 rifle, and that ought to do it. And Frank says, Dad, that's great for lizards and rabbits and stuff, but I mean, if we run into real Indians out there and start shooting with a .22, it's just going to make them angry. And he says, I don't want you going out there with this old Navy revolver, Frank. It's just not right. He says, especially for Phoenix High School's all-star running back on the state championship team. And then he reaches behind him and pulls out an oiled cloth, and he opens it up, and it's a 1911 .45 caliber automatic, semi-automatic pistol, which is going to be very important at the end of the movie. And he's completely blown away by this. And Dad says, "You seen one of these before?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I've seen one. I've never fired one, but I've seen them." And Dad basically says, "Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the clip in," and he hands it to me. Dad, it's not a clip, it's a magazine. Clips are what the Germans are using to load their Gewehrs. The Huns over in Germany are using the clip. This is a magazine. Okay, son, it's a magazine. He puts it in there. He says, "Okay." Frank racks it. Dad says, "Now unload the gun and give it back to me." So Frank drops the magazine out, hands it back to him, grip first, and just as he's about to hand it back to him, he smiles, and then just takes the one out of the chamber. Because that's, for those of you not familiar with these things, when you have a revolver, you can see whether there's a bullet in the chamber on the revolver, and with a semi-automatic, you can put the magazine in, rack one goes into the chamber, you can drop the magazine out, you think you've unloaded. It's the simplest thing. Every gun owner has to pass this test that I know of, but they're still around in there. So Frank is kind of playing with them a little bit, and he does that. And Dad says, "Well, son, here you go. This is yours. Congratulations. Merry Christmas. Happy early Christmas for you." And so that's how Frank Luke gets introduced to the .45 automatic. And that scene does a lot of stuff. There's a picture of Frank when he's young. Well, all the pictures of Frank are when he's young, because he was 20 when he was killed. And it's taken during his flight training, and he's sitting on the ground, sitting on his butt on the ground, and he's got a Lewis machine gun. And he's just got this thing, and he's just getting machine gun practice. He's going to be in an airplane with machine guns. It's nice to know how to load and unjam those things. And he looks like he's just about to fire, or has just fired this Lewis gun. He's got this huge grin on his face, just beaming, just beaming. And yeah, it's a fully semi-automatic. And so the whole reason that Frank Luke is Frank Luke is because when he was shot down and he was dying, he told everybody that he wasn't going to be taken alive. So he had to fall out of the airplane. He couldn't climb out because he'd been shot through both lungs. And then he gets to his feet, and he's passing out from lack of blood, and he just starts firing. 3 shots were fired in the general direction of the advancing Germans. None of them got hit. But that's what he did. And so that gun becomes important. And that scene is fictional, but everything about it is real. His uncle was in the Civil War. It's not unreasonable to expect that he would have gotten one of those. It's not unreasonable to expect any of this stuff. And it's just a really cool scene. Because I have a much higher opinion of him, I think, than the guy who wrote this book, who is basically concentrating on how rebellious he was and insubordinate. He was all of those things. But I think he was so busy tracking down that last flight and finding out all the orders he disobeyed. But when you look at this kid and the friends he had and what he did, he just seems like a really good kid to me. And everything else is going really, really well. So I'm just, you have to do some things. It's fun because there are things that are known, and then you just have to go with those. And I suppose for me, my obligation to tell them the truth on this, because I take this very seriously, is that I'm certainly not going to contradict anything that I know to be true. And I'm not going to add anything that I don't have any kind of historical justification for. So, good example of that would be, and then we'll move on, start with some questions. A good example of that would be, he finds himself in East Coast, I think it's in New Jersey or something, with 800 other American servicemen, and they are about to board the ship to do the transit over to, first to Liverpool, then from Liverpool by train to Dover across the Channel. And they're on a ship that I think was called the Vaterland. It was an impounded German ship, but it was the largest ship in the world at the time, largest ship afloat, and it became a troop transport. And so he went over there in luxury. It was like riding in a luxury hotel. But what we know historically was that everybody was constantly worried about the U-boats and Lusitania and all the rest of it. And we know that somebody reported seeing 3 different U-boats, and we know that that one of the escorts had dropped at least 2 depth charges, and we know that Frank heard the depth charges and ran up into the deck to see what's going on. Now, I'm not going to show him. He's not going to see the U-boat, and he's sure as hell not going to shoot the periscope out of the U-boat, you know. She's going down. But, you know, you have to ask yourself, what does a guy like this say when he hears depth charges going off? And it's, you know, this is the essence of this kind of thing for any kind of character writing, any kind of movie writing. But for this one especially, it's like you got to put your head, you got to become this guy as a writer. And all of the things that he does in combat and as a bare knuckle fighter in the mines in Arizona, and all of the thing, and as a fullback who was knocking down tackles, just these guys were like getting out of his way. He hit that hard. All of this stuff says, you know, big tough guy. And then you find out that no, he's like, he couldn't stop talking. He was super high strung. You know, you think he's going to be this strong, silent type, like 2 words. No, he's constantly talking all the time. And they'd say he talking in the past tense, present tense, future tense, all in the same sentence. And he was constantly bragging about what he was going to do when he got his hand on those Huns and all the rest of it. And you gotta, if that guy's going to be doing a lot of talking, he's got to be talking in a way that is accurate. My biggest problem, thank you very much for that too, Kellen. Another super chat there with just $1 amount attached, not $1 is a dollar value attached to it. It's a $10 super chat just for being nice. Thank you very much. So my biggest problem actually still is the vernacular. What were people saying, and how were they saying it? You know, what would this guy call his father? You know, I'm going with Pop on this one, I think. But this is the difference between lazy writing and not lazy writing, and it's the difference between something being really good and, at the best case, being okay. Pops. I like Pops. Thank you for that, Lady Hawk. I like Pops better than Pop. So I really like this guy, which is good, because what he did is unbelievable, and nobody's heard of him. It's just unbelievable. So anyway, so talk in a way that's accurate and in a way that develops his character, says Jay Coulter. Correct, yes. Which, what movie was this? I was listening to a YouTube video today on accents, on how the English accent has changed over the course of 200-300 years. And this guy did American accents, North American accents, from 1660 to 2020. And he'd come in every 70 or 80 years, and he just really did the research on this. And you just listen to him while he's talking, and you hear the language just changing and evolving. There was some movie where they got that language exactly right. I don't remember what it was. I know that Daniel Day-Lewis always got the voice before he got the character. He said, I just get the voice first. And everything after that follows. And when I saw Lincoln, I was so impressed, because I figured I was the only person in the audience who knew that Abraham Lincoln didn't talk like this. Every time you see him on movies, he's got this timbrous voice. You know, he's this slow, wise, you know, kind of, you know, sad, kind of wise voice. But no, he spoke quickly and had a really high-pitched voice. And the only way I know that is because Shelby Foote in the Civil War said he was recorded, somebody recorded him phonetically, and he was making a speech or something as a politician. And he said, Mr. Cheerman, Cheerman instead of chairman. He said, Mr. Cheerman. And once you get just that, you get that. And the voice of Lincoln in that movie is unbelievable, and Daniel Day-Lewis is beyond unbelievable. I am the President of the United States, clothed in incredible power. History is watching us. It's just a fantastic film. Anyway, so that's that. So I've got a lot of writing to do and get this thing out the door. And then after that, fortunately, once that's delivered, I've still got 2 rewrites to do, but I've put so much work into this first draft that I think this rewrites are going to be relatively minimal. And so the second I get this thing delivered, I can start moving fast on the major Mace Mattingly stuff, and the interview stuff is coming along as well too. So we're hanging on by our fingernails here. I was hoping to be doing the interview shows a month ago, but there's something I can't. I had no control over. Oh, by the way, I was thinking about it. We talked briefly, and this will be the last of the entertainment stuff. We're talking about getting kind of thoughtful presents for the people on board, and I'd mentioned maybe like getting bronzed work gloves or something for Mike Rowe, and then I just then I thought, why don't we get him a gold-plated wrench? And we found out what it would cost to electroplate that thing, and then I did some searching. It turns out that Mac Tools does sort of anniversary editions of gold-plated wrench sets and gold-plated chisels and all that other stuff, and its price is reasonable, but it's it doesn't have to be expensive, but it can't be cheap. I just don't want these things to be tacky, and so I think we'll get him just the most beautiful one that I saw was it's a three chisel gold chisel commemorative set in plated in 24 karat gold, and I thought perfect. Mike's out there chiseling away at these people that don't know how a chisel works, so something like that. So that's something that we can get it here, get the little placard on it, and that gets us 3 of them ready to go. So that's that. Hello, Casey, who writes, hello, Will Bittle. Hello, Seiki. Yeah, all right. Anyway, so there we go. So that's basically it for our warm-up act, and now on with the feature presentation. So I think we'll go to the wretched hive of scum and villainy known as the comment section over at BillWhittle.com, and let's see what we can find there. The sets are available on eBay for about $150 or something, and they look really nice, and they come in their own wooden case and stuff. So that's just I just think it's a cool thing to do. The reason I like it the most is because, and it was Shelley's idea actually to put this little plaque on these things, because I very much like the idea of giving these little gifts from the membership at BillWhittle.com, because I know there's a lot of people out there who really admire guys like Gary Sinise and John Voight and Mike Rowe and all the rest, and I think a lot of people like the idea of being able to say, yeah, I was a part of that. It's a little thing I wanted to do to pay you back, Mike, thanks for all the sanity. We really need it. Okay, so something about the walk-in music today. What was I going to say about that? We do walk-in music, as you've probably heard 100,000 times by now. We don't record it. If you're watching this later on YouTube, we just do it live on the Twitch stream. And one of the songs that we put in the lineup, and we've been playing for years now without any change at all. They're all TV show tunes, and one of them's the Twilight Zone theme, which is iconic, obviously. But I was listening to that, and I thought, I can't really remember. I certainly am unaware of anything that's out there today that routinely surprises me, and pretty much every episode of the Twilight Zone surprised me. It was just unbelievably good writing, and some better than others, obviously, but some of them are all-time classics. And I really miss that. It'd be great to see some new stuff where you know, because they've remade it a bunch of times. AKA Woody Fool says Black Mirror is prophecy. Yes, Black Mirror comes closest to that by far. That's the only thing I've ever seen that's even in the ballpark. And they've remade Twilight Zone 3 or 4 times now as a TV show, and it just lasts, 5 episodes, and it's got the exact same feel as when they remake the Twilight Zone. It's got the exact same feel as watching Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson instead of Carl Sagan. It's like just not doing it for me, guys. I'm just sorry. It's not very good. But I sure do miss that. So it'd be great to have some surprises. Oh, and by the way, I did 2 speaking events the last couple weeks, and I've got my 2023-24 lineup. My model on the display floor, and I'm going to have fun running with this as much as I can. So, all right, let me see here. Let's have to check something here. It's going to be an interesting question. Okay. We've got Eric Blake, who begins this relatively short question with the man in the hats in the office tonight. Come in if you're a turtle. And he's wanting me to say, am I a turtle? You bet your ass I'm a turtle. So here we go for Eric Blake. Sun Tzu said, because Eric and Sun are like this: know your enemy, know yourself, and you'll always know victory. If you know yourself but not your enemy, for every victory will come a defeat. If you know neither your enemy nor yourself, you will be imperiled in every battle. So I guess what he's saying is, if you know your enemy and yourself, you're going to bat 100%. If you only know one, then you're going to bat 50. And if you don't know either, then you're going to lose. The more I look at our side bill, the more I wonder if we're in a fourth situation Master Sun didn't think about. We more or less know our enemy, but not ourselves. We expertly analyze the left's crimes against society and nation and how they succeed in their efforts, but so many of us seem blissfully unaware of our own weaknesses, culturally and otherwise. What do you think? How do we fix it? Must investigate further. Well, this is interesting, because before I read this question just a moment ago, I said I had my 2023-24 lineup of insight, my brilliant observations on what's going on here, and a fair amount of that. In fact, virtually all of it is as a result of this book, The Fourth Turning, and I'm very grateful to the Strato Lounger who recommended that book for me. So, the idea of the fourth turning is that there is every 80 years or so a cycle, and that a generation's perspective on life is predicated on where that generation fits relative to the last crisis. The argument is that the human lifespan has generally been 80 years, more or less, close enough, and that like the seasons, human life is divided into 4 parts. There's childhood, young adulthood, maturity, and then eventually old age, which corresponds to spring, summer, fall, and winter, and on and on and on. And so what I've been doing on these live speaking events is basically making that case as quickly as I can, because the book is really, I hate to say tedious, but tedious. It's just tedious. It's brilliant, but it's just, come on. But that doesn't take away from the power of it. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what this next crisis is going to be, and I said I think it's going to be the collapse of the cities, and that's part of the equation. But I think it was just looking at the obvious stuff. I think if you say that half of, I'm getting there, Eric. If you say that half of the population of the country lives in cities, and the cities collapse the way that they are collapsing in front of our eyes, and economy too, then the crisis won't be a nuclear war or a zombie apocalypse. It'll be half of the country now, half of the country is uneducated and likely uneducatable. And here's the thing that actually really woke me up over the last, since we talked last. Clearly, you can look at things like these, these flash mobs and looting the stores and all of the protests and all of these urban things, and you see young men, mostly black men looting these stores, and you think, okay, this toxicity and so on. Yes, that's going to be one of the things we're going to face. And then you think about the border crisis and all the gangs coming in, and that's largely a Hispanic crisis. And yes, that's actually going to be part of the problem too. But I actually think that the biggest single slice of the crisis that we're going to be facing is that there are millions and millions of young, rich, white people who are in their 20s who are absolutely children and are incapable of dealing with life. And furthermore, they have no respect for anything, and why should they? They didn't raise themselves, they didn't educate themselves. They have never been told no. And I've been watching lots and lots and lots of body cam footage lately of mostly Gen Zers and almost exclusively women, just being confronted with reality. I mentioned it before, but I'll go through it again just very quickly. A cop will pull over somebody for drunk driving, and he will, and the body cams are amazing. We should have had body cams from the beginning, but they're the greatest things in the world. Every single police encounter out there now is an episode of Cops. Because I love Cops. I watched Cops for a decade. I used to binge watch Cops when they were running it in syndication, and I used to binge watch it on YouTube. But that required a camera crew and all the rest of the stuff. Now every single encounter is potentially recorded, and Freedom of Information Act means you can get a hold of them. So I've seen 60 of these, I think. Knock, knock, knock on the window. This young girl turns around. Hi, I'm Officer so-and-so. Can you roll down the window, please? Why? Because I need to talk to you. What do you need to talk to me about? Miss, I need you to roll down the window. I'm pulling you over for this. I'm going to need to see your license, your registration, and your proof of insurance. Why do I have to show you that? Because I'm asking you to, ma'am, I have the legal authority to do this. You're not allowed to arrest me or pull me over. Ma'am, I do. And so then you'll see this go on and on and on. And then you'll see the policeman or policewoman, and their patience is so astonishing that it's often like, okay, that's you're just stop negotiating with these children. But I can't tell you how many times I've seen it. Ma'am, you're going to have to, I need you to step out of the car. Why? Because I need to conduct a field sobriety test. But I wasn't drinking. Ma'am, this is not going to go the way you want it to. This is how we do these things. Well, I'm not going to do it. I'm not getting out of the car. No, I'm not going to do it. I said, ma'am, I'm going to ask you again, and if you don't get out of the car, then I'm going to have to smash the window and remove you from the car. And I really don't want to do that. Right now, you're being pulled over for a potential traffic ticket, and I really would like you to go home. We all would like you to go home. We don't want to take you to jail, but we will if you don't get out of the car. I'm not getting out of the car. Not going to get out of the car. You can't make me get out of the car. And then smash goes the windows. And the second that window gets smashed, everything changes. And by the way, when they're talking to the cops, it's, F you and F you this, and you can't F and do that. And listen to me, bitch, and just they're just the most horrific people. Horrible. Donut operators, very interesting. Your first time chat there from Barking Spiders 1959. I think I know what that reference is. I seem to remember that when somebody would pass wind or something, that somebody would say that it was an African barking spider. In any event, so again and again and again, these police are unbelievably professional and kind. We don't want to hurt you. Well, you can't tell me what to do, blah, blah, blah. And of course, most of them are just completely smashed drunk. Out goes the window, open the door. And the second they start to grab this person, and I can't make this clear enough, these policemen have been discussing this with this person for 20 minutes. 20 minutes. They've been sitting there trying to reason this person out of the car. And the second that happens, they start screaming and you know, put your hands behind your back. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Why am I being arrested? You're being arrested for driving under the influence. But I didn't do anything. Stop resisting. Stop resisting. So they start kicking the cops. You know, now you're going to get a battery on a law enforcement officer. You know, and then they put him in the back of the police car, and these 23, 24-year-old supposed adults start kicking and bashing their heads against the windows, just bashing their heads against the windows as hard as they can, like any other 4-year-old. And it's just unbelievable. Steve Whoop says, police are jacked on testosterone, itching to kick your ass. Well, I have to tell you, Steve, I'm not trying to argue with you here, but I will tell you this. I have never seen that kind of patience. I wouldn't have lasted 3 minutes with this person. I would have been, at 3 minutes, I would have been, okay, we're done with this. But it's unbelievable how these people, these police officers were backing up over this. And pretty much every single time that these people were arrested with their arms behind their back, they're lying on the ground, or they're sitting in the police car, and they're all saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Well, you're sure yelling at me. You're still calling me an MFer and all the rest of the stuff. So you seem to be breathing okay there. So what I'm trying to get at here, without, you know, just go see them for yourself. Just look up police body cam footage, and Gen Z generally do it for you. Or Karen interaction. Karen's part of the same overall phenomenon. So what we're going to be facing, Eric, is we're going to be facing, I finally got it in the box. I don't know if the box is as tight as it'll get, but what this coming crisis is going to be a crisis between the lawless and the lawful. That's what it's going to be. And it's tempting to look at inter-city violence and all the rest of that stuff. Okay, that's going to stay self-contained. It just does. When they had the Rodney King riots here, they acquitted the officers in very white and affluent Simi Valley, and when the riots happened, the blacks burned their own neighborhoods down. So that's going to be toxic. The border is going to be toxic. We got all these gangs here and all the rest of it. But in the middle of all of this, all across the country, is this entire cohort of children. And I don't think, I'd like to talk to professional psychologists about this, but I don't think that you can unwire that once you get past a certain age. I think it's generally agreed that from the ages of 3 to 7 or 8 or so, 2 to 7 or 8, your core personality is determined during that time. If you don't get enough love, that's going to show up there. If you got alcoholic parents, it's going to show up there. If you've never been told no and you're allowed to temper tantrum your way through life, that's going to show up there. But it's generally agreed that after 8 or 9 years old, it's not that you can't change your behavior, but you are certainly wired in a certain direction. And so I'm beginning to think that Barking Spiders Again says, I have no patience for unemployed behavior. Yes, that's it. We are going to be dealing with 100 million or more unemployed, unemployable, uneducated, uneducatable, angry, entitled, vicious, rude, disrespectful, incompetent, helpless children. And that's what's going to be the next crisis, if I had to bet. That's the thing that I see happening everywhere. The big problem is that if the law doesn't get enforced by law enforcement, then citizens will enforce the law. So far, so good. But in this crisis, law enforcement, the power of the state, is going to be on the side of the criminals. In California, if somebody breaks into your house, it may not be directly true, but you get the idea. Somebody comes into your house and you shoot them in the leg, then you go to jail and they sue you for $1 million, and that's when the power of the state is on the side of the criminals. And there's no question that that's happening all around the country in these democratically controlled areas. No question. Some homeless guy in Los Angeles is throwing bags of poo against a restaurant I used to go to all the time, and this guy says, I call the police, and the police say, what is it? It says, a homeless guy's throwing bags of feces against my restaurant side here. Come on down and arrest this guy. And the LAPD says, we can't do anything about it. We're not allowed to. We're not allowed to arrest them. That's not the officer speaking. That's coming from whoever's pulling Gavin Newsom's strings, and Gavin Newsom is pulling other strings, and that's what that is. Infidel 42, I remember seeing that. Says Jordan Peterson said that it's by about 4 years old. If you're not properly socialized by then you'll end up a sociopath. Yeah, I think I forget the numbers, but I heard that little exchange. He said, if you just leave like little kids alone, you're going to find something like 10% of them have sociopathic behaviors, but a significant number of those, like of that 10%, 6 or 7% will be socialized out of it. But if you're not socialized out of it by age 4 or 5 or 6, then you're going to be a sociopath for the rest of your life. And so here's something else that's common to all of these young, rich, white, liberal kids that are calling two other things that are part of the equation. And I'm getting to what we need to do, Eric, believe it or not. I've just got to set this up. One thing that they do when they actually get in trouble is they demand to speak to their parents. I'm not, I need to talk to my mom. Well, you're not going to talk to your mom, but I need to. There's my phone right there. I have to call my mom. You can't call your mom. I need to call my dad. Well, you can't call your dad, ma'am. Well, I have to, ma'am. You're 24 years old. You're an adult. We're not going to sit here and wait for your daddy to come and make this okay. You're under arrest for DWI, and that's it. It's kind of satisfying to watch them realize, hey, this is not going to go my way. It's actually very satisfying. So there's this constant dependent on their parents to get them out of trouble, and their parents will eventually pass away, because that's generally what happens. And they don't seem to be prepared for a world without that. That's one of the things I noticed about this. And the other one is just the lack. It's the total lack of any respect for authority whatsoever. I've never once seen, now of course, needless to say, the ones that end up on YouTube, this is self-selecting, I understand that. The ones that end up on YouTube are the ones that are interesting. For every one of these things you see, there's probably 200 that everybody goes, sorry about that, yes sir, I'll do whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I'm seeing larger and larger numbers of people that just simply don't believe that the law applies to them. And this will have something to do with Marusha Dark's question, which is coming up in a minute. So Eric, the answer to your question is you look at our side and what are we doing wrong and what do we need to do, and in light of like the traditional thinking, which is last cycle's thinking, what we're doing is screwing everything up. We can't put together a political message. We can't sell freedom. We can't sell leave me alone. We argue with the Democrats about saving our democracy when the word democracy is part of the Democratic Party. We don't have the common sense to start arguing about whether we should save the republic. If you say republic, nobody will know what you're talking about. Everything you have said about our side is absolutely true, and I've been saying this myself too. It's like we're absolutely clueless. But your essential question is, what do we have to do to change? And this is why I went through this whole dog and pony show for the last 15 minutes. I don't think we have to do anything to change, because the weapons on this next crisis are going to be competence, hard work, honesty, respect, dignity, cooperation, trust. That's the weaponry. It's not going to be a physical battle. I suspect there will be a fair amount of violence that'll be pretty tightly contained to areas that are already extremely violent. But I don't see this. Look, on one side of this, if I'm right about this, if it's the lawful versus the lawless, then on one side you've got people who are highly educated, highly disciplined, emotionally mature, capable of making decisions. They're independent. They're able to cooperate at the same time. And they're heavily armed against a group of people who are clueless, cowards. You get the idea. It's not as a physical conflict. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's like the Lakers playing a junior high school team. But that's not really the issue. That's not going to be about the violence. It's going to be about ultimately is going to be about, I'll just go with what flew into my head. It's ultimately going to be about having the strength to do the things that need to be done and maintain your humanity and your kindness. That's the last thing I said when I was doing this speaking event a couple of nights ago. I said the danger for us is not going to be, we're going to be taken over by these weenies because they're cowards and they're babies and they're children and they're stupid. The danger is going to be that we start to get filled with hate and we start to hate them and hate everything about it. That's the danger. This is going to be a moral conflict. And like I said, this is my new model for 2324. And if this is true, then one of the great shocking things about this fourth turning theory is that the hero generation, the generation that gets us through the crisis, the hero generation is going to be Gen Z. Think about that for a little bit. And you think, what? It's true. It's true. I've been working this situation. I believe there's a lot to this theory. I believe that every single time that this cycle goes around, it's a different crisis, but that the pattern is the same. I mentioned before that one of the things that you'll often hear spoken of, contemptuously, is that generals are always preparing to fight the last war. I think it's more accurate to say that generals are always preparing to plug the last hole. Last crisis in 1940 was a crisis of battle fleets of aircraft carriers and battleships and destroyers and cruisers coming across the Pacific Ocean, and I'm pretty sure that we've prepared ourselves very well against that happening again, so it's going to be coming from a different place. Likewise, the previous crisis in Europe might have been, secret police kicking down the doors in Russia and Germany. They're not going to kick the doors down here because we're armed, because we blocked that hole. It's not going to happen that way. It's just not. So it's going to be a moral issue, and it's going to have to be. It has refined my perception of what my role in this is. Unless I get sloppy on crossing the street corner, I will live through this crisis, and it'll be appropriate because I was born in the first generation after the crisis. So I will live to see the end of the crisis and the return of my cohort, which will be the generation that probably follows Gen Z, which would be what they're calling the alphas, I guess. They and the boomers will have a very similar psychological makeup if this theory is correct, because they will not have lived through the crisis. That'll be Gen Z's job. But they will be children whose parents lived through the crisis, and that's the golden generation. Because you get all the benefits of the crisis from your parents, and you don't have to pay the price. It's just nothing but optimism and growth. That's where all the growth happens in that first season. So if this thing happens according to this theory, and I think the theory's sound, then that means that that I'm not going to be a warrior in this fight, and I mean that in the same way that Dwight Eisenhower and Franklin Roosevelt were not warriors in World War II. The heroism was done by a generation after them. That's where the heroes were, the GI generation. And so I've lately come to realize, no, your job now, Bill, you tried to, hold back this tide, not a tide of people, the tide, the wall of water that is unstoppable. And I've come to believe it can't stop it now. So since I'm thinking this thing through, kind of on the fly here, I basically say to myself, okay, so what can you do, And I realized, now your job, Billy, is to help prepare the hero generation. Your job is to give them the moral guidance and the intellectual guidance and the weapons that they're going to need in this mimetic fight, in this moral, spiritual crisis that we're going to be facing. And I have to reach them. I have to be the dad. Yeah, that's pretty much it, Taps. Thanks. That's it. It's not just me, obviously, but this hero generation, this Gen Z generation, it's hard to square that. But then you think about it. If you think about the greatest generation, their older brothers and sisters were flappers in the 20s, and everybody said they're just a bunch of alcoholics and losers, and they've got no grit whatsoever. And it turned out they did. So So the answer to your question is what do we have to do differently? I actually have come to the conclusion, Eric, that this is not going to be about politics. I don't think there's a political answer to this. I don't think it's any more a question of winning elections. I think we're past all that personally. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try, because I don't think it can be avoided, but it can certainly be soft landed. And so we should be trying real hard for the softest landing we can get. But generally speaking, I had this flash during one of our Stratosphere Lounge shows. And I don't remember who said it. It might have been you, Eric, actually, but somebody said the solution to the new problems will not be the solutions to the old problems. You're going to have to start thinking about something completely new. And all of this animosity and all of this anger that is generated by these things that I'm watching has got to be converted into a kind of love, a kind of understanding and a kind of transcendence. That's the word I'm looking for. I'm going to have to transcend my natural orneriness about this and just keep reminding myself that, okay, so these people that are not coming out of the car, who are calling policemen, MFers, and daring them to do something. You can't arrest me. You can't. And the second you arrest them, they start screaming rape, and they start screaming I can't breathe. Those people who I can't stand. It's not their fault. I got to keep reminding myself that, and somebody's got to go in there and try and parent these people. And if this theory of mine is correct, and I haven't heard anybody else talking about this, by the way, so we put a little pin on that. But if it turns out that I'm right or close to right, then what we are going to be facing is we're going to have to reparent half the country. And what I do know about psychology or abnormal psychology is that people who are suboptimally raised, like addicts, for example, or alcoholics, same thing. It is possible, alcoholics, it's possible for an alcoholic to hit bottom, and then through force of will, and especially through a support group and working the steps and all the rest of that stuff, it is possible for alcoholics to no longer be owned by alcoholism, but they'll never be social drinkers. They're broken on some fundamental level, and I'm actually in this category myself. There's a crack there. I am actually a social drinker. I have no problem being a social drinker. I don't think I've ever bought liquor for myself alone. And I can go out and have a drink or two, and then I can go 3 months without having a drink. I'm a fine social drinker. And I can have 6 drinks too, so that's fine for me. That's not my particular problem. I worry about other things. But you can make your life manageable, but you'll never be able to make your life effortless in the way that kids who are well parented do things. You'll never get there, and you just got to face it. And I face it myself, and I've been thinking about it for so long. I don't really get too whacked about it, but I sometimes say, Bill, what could you have been if you'd been raised better? What could you have been if you'd gotten more of the things that most kids need when you were a kid? What could you have been? Maybe you could have ruled the world. On the other hand, without all of that pain and horror, then not my childhood was not horrible, but then maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you just be a really good advertising copywriter or something. I don't know. But in any event, this is, I think, going to be the challenge. We're going to have to reparent half the country. And many of them, most of them, are never going to be fully functioning adults. We're just going to have to carry them. That's what I think this crisis is going to be. We're going to have to carry them. And well, Steve Whoop said, treasure them. Boy, that's hard. See, this is why it's a crisis. If it was easy, then this wouldn't be a problem. I don't want to treasure them. I want them spanked. I want them to get a big spanking, and I want the spanking to continue until the bullshit stops. But that's not the answer. The answer is much harder than that. You got to get past that, and it's just hard. And the only way I get through it is by constantly reminding myself, these people, these brats, these little snotty brats, these grown children, these crybabies, these entitled little monsters, didn't ask for any of this. They didn't raise themselves, they didn't educate themselves. So they have been socialized now. This entire Gen Z has been socialized to believe that the cops are always wrong, that the law is always wrong, that you have nothing but rights and no responsibilities, that they can't touch you, they can't arrest you, they can't do this, they can't do that, they can't do this, so on. And watching this confrontation between that philosophy and reality is alternately horrifying, satisfying, amusing, and sad. But the answer to your question, Eric, is I think basically I don't think we need to be doing much different. We just need to continue being decent, honest people, and the trap is anger. It's well, that's the trap. That's the trap. We're going to have a lot of lifting to do. When I say we, I don't mean me. I'm early in the fourth quarter. I'm looking up at the scoreboard and I'm thinking, fourth quarter, really? Yeah. Well, there's 14 minutes and 20 seconds left on the clock in the fourth quarter, but we're in the fourth quarter, and so I'm gonna be around. I hope to be around to observe this and to be able to influence it. But the actual work is going to be done by people who are 3 generations younger than me, and this is what I've got to be along for. And we're going to have to change a lot of things. I don't think Eric says time for a Hail Mary pass. No, it's not going to be a Hail Mary. I don't think there's going to be anything even particularly dramatic about this, to be honest with you. I'm thinking that things are just going to continue to, what's the word they use in Fourth Turning? Unravel. This is the unraveling where there's the high, then there's the maturity, then there's the unraveling, then there's the crisis. We are moving rapidly from the unraveling into the crisis. I can see it every day. This is why I'm so impressed by this theory. And the good news is that those feelings that we have towards Gen Z were exactly the same feelings that people 80 years ago had to the generation polar opposite them in this 80-year cycle. So it's going to be, I'd never really thought of it that clear. That's why I love talking about this, especially with this crowd, because this is a highly educated, extraordinarily, that's the best people I've ever met. The people that are, watch the show or watch it live, especially, and so we're going to be not only going to be the crusty old sergeants. We're also going to be the supply depot. We're going to be manufacturing the weapons. Because the weapons are going to be things like, how do you, I'm not going to say re-educate, because that is a horribly tainted word, but how are you going to reach people who've been brainwashed for 25 years? How do you get them to unthink some of the things that they believe in? Reality will help a lot there, but rather than having, look, the better we are looking at this from geostationary orbit, the kinder we are, and also the hipper we are, because that's the missing key to the puzzle, by the way. That's the word I wish I'd led with. We're going to have to be a lot hipper, and the reason we're going to have to be hipper is because if the message doesn't get there, then it doesn't matter how good the message is. It's not just a question of having the morals and the philosophy and all the rest of it. You got to put it in a package that the people who need it are going to get. You can't just, it doesn't do any good preaching to the choir. That's why they call it preaching to the choir. And I have to, and it's good. It's a good break because I'm pretty much done with this. But Aviate 68 says, "Hey Bill, I've been watching your stuff for years in the background now. Just passed my commercial check ride a few days ago. Hooray, hooray. Congratulations, Aviate 68. That's absolutely impressive. When I took my private pilot license, both in gliders and in single engine land, both times my instructor said, you should take the commercial test now. You're flying, and the things you have to know to pass the instrument rating, take the commercial test now. Do it now. And I'm like, yeah, I'll do it in a week or two. I'll get to it in a second here. But good for you. Good for you. That is a level of precision. I will deviate briefly because we're going to Marisha's question next, but just very quickly, since the subject of airplanes happened to come up, I didn't do that. I didn't put that comment there. That's just there's no such thing as coincidences. That may be the stupidest sentence that's ever been uttered by human beings. There's no such thing as coincidences. I'm willing to agree that there are many big things happening behind the scenes that may not be obvious, but to say there's no such thing as coincidences, that's just nuts. Anyway, in DCS, which is the military flight sim, it's extremely accurate. The F-18C Hornet, the Legacy Hornet, was the first full fidelity module for DCS. And what that means is that every single switch that's in the actual Hornet is in the simulation, and it does exactly what it does in the Hornet. And you have to use every single one of those switches in order to do what you need to do. Just starting the engine is significant process. If you're really going to do the startup right, it's a 15-20 minute process at least. Okay, and this just is going specifically to Aviate's very proud announcement here of having passed his commercial check ride. So when you take the practical test for your pilot's license, needless to say, the private pilot's written test is not as complicated as the commercial test, and the amount in the air, when you have to pass the practical test with the flight examiner, you have to do, it's not like you do different maneuvers for commercial or airline transport pilot. You just have to do the same maneuvers to a much higher degree of precision. And this is what got me to DCS. So I was able to slam Hornets onto the deck of a carrier fairly consistently. And I'm starting to feel pretty good about that. And then there is something that one of the DCS community put together, and it's a mission that you can load in DCS, and it's called Banker's Case 1 Recovery. And Case 1 Recovery is how you recover jets onto an aircraft carrier under VFR conditions. You know, visibility and ceiling essentially unlimited. Clear day, landing on a carrier. And Banker's Case 1 recovery mission, let me just walk you through this, because those of you out there need to understand what Aviate here has accomplished, give you some idea about this. In this bloody mission is so frickin' hard. I've done it 100 times now, I would say at least. A perfect score, and this is based on what the Navy uses to grade their aviators, because every single landing by every single aviator in the course of his life is extensively criticized and broken down. It's never, oh, you came aboard great. No. Every single one of them is like what you did right, what you did wrong, because landing a frickin' jet on a piece of moving steel the size of a football field is quite an achievement. So on this Bankers thing, I'm just going to walk you through it so you get an idea of what's required. Perfect score is 75. My best score is a 68 after trying 100 times, and anything above 50 is pretty impressive. So here's what you have to do in order to get a perfect score on Banker's Case 1 Recovery. First leg of the recovery, Case 1 Recovery, is you're in your jet, you're 10 or 15 miles in trail of the boat, of Mom, and the first marker is going to be you're going to have to fly slightly offset to the right of that carrier, and you're going to have to be at 350 knots and 800 feet. And you have to be at 350 knots within 10 knots and 800 feet within 20 or 30 feet. Otherwise, you don't get a 4 out of 4, you get a 3 out of 4. And the faster you or slower you are, and the higher or lower you are, then you get a 2 out of 4, then you get a 1 out of 4. So you got to be at 800 feet, at 350 knots when you are abeam that carrier. You look down, make sure the deck is clear. Okay, that's relatively easy. But even then, you've got a jet that's just got so much power, 350 knots. If you raise the nose just a fraction of a degree, you're going to start climbing real fast. So you are constantly dealing with this thing. So, great. You get past the boat, go upwind a little bit, and then a few seconds once you pass the front of the carrier, you have to slam this thing into probably a 60-degree bank angle. And flight control system, fly-by-wire flight control system, has a little indicator that's on your heads-up display. It's called the velocity vector. And this little circle is showing you where your jet is going to go. This is where your jet is going to end up. It's constantly being calculated several times a second. So you basically have to slam this thing into a 60-degree turn, and then when you pull that turn, you have to keep that velocity vector on the horizon, which means that in that 60-degree bank, you're losing most of your lift now into the turn. You have to add enough power so that you don't start to sink, and not too much power so that you start to rise. You've got to be at 800 feet in the early break. You've got to be at 800 feet in the late break. If you're 20, 30 feet high, it starts to get to be, instead of being 4 out of 4, it's 3 out of 4, it's 5 out of 7 or whatever. So 800 feet, 350 knots, 60-degree bank, 3G turn, get it below 250 knots. You have to keep that velocity vector on the horizon, can't get above or below 800 feet. Roll out of this bank on the other side. You're now heading exactly downwind. You're at the reciprocal of the base recovery course. That's the course that the carrier is going. And you've got to come out of that break at 800 feet. And during the turn, when you start the turn, you got to put out your air brake. And during the turn, when you get below 250 knots, while you're constantly keeping that freaking velocity vector right on the horizon, you got to drop your gear, got to drop your flaps, and you close the brake. And then as you're flying downwind, you go from 800 feet to 600 feet smoothly. And you have to retrim the airplane enormously. You got to trim it up to 13 degrees angle of attack or something. And you have to be 1.2 to 1.5 miles away from that carrier. And you have to do all of this perfectly. You've got just 7-8 seconds. So now you're at 800 feet descending as you go downwind past the carrier. Now you're at 600 feet. When you pass the deck, the flight deck of the carrier, you got to be at 600 feet. If you're at 620 feet, they start dinging you. If you're at 520 feet, you get dinged hard. If you're at 400 feet, you're getting 0 out of 7. So there goes your 75. Then, at 600 feet, abeam the ramp of the carrier, you start a 30-degree bank, and then you have to begin this descent by pulling back enough power so the velocity vector drops below the horizon, but not too much. When you cross the 90-degree mark, when you're doing your final turn, you cross the 90-degree mark, you got to be between 450 feet. That's right where you want to be. And as you continue around this turn, you're going to cross the wake of the carrier. You need to be at 380 feet when you cross the wake, and you have to be on speed, which within 5 knots of 140 knots or something like that. So then you have to line this thing up, and you're watching the meatball, and you're checking your glide slope and all the rest of it. If you come in low, especially low, they're going to take 10 points off of you, and you just plain fly this thing in and down, and you're aiming for the third wire. If you come in too early, and then you're going to catch the first wire, that's 7 off your score, or 10 or whatever. And it is so freaking demanding that every single time I would do it, I would just say, all right, we're going to do it again. I can do better than this. I can do better than this. I can do better than this. And for me, it turned out that I was getting the early stuff right, and then every one of these steps, as I continued to do it, I get this right, then I get this right, then I get this right consistently, then this consistently. I'm getting to the point now where I'm consistently getting 50 and above, and I've gotten one I think was either 68. It might have been a 70. I was convinced it was impossible to get a 75, but somebody did a screenshot of the score after it was over. They flew the perfect Case 1 recovery, which means within 5 to 10 knots the whole way, and within 50 to 100 feet in a jet that's moving 350 miles an hour. So all of that to say, Aviate, congratulations. The Case 3 recovery is significantly harder. Just the marshalling and where they're going to put you in these parking flight paths and patterns and descending, and the signal is Charlie and all the rest of the stuff, and the clock face, all of it. But just that. So for somebody to get a commercial license, I'm looking forward to it. Aviate. We should DCS man, we should just kind of figure out how to get together, and we'll frickin' get out there, and we'll get in some Hornets or whatever, and we'll do that. Or Eagles, or whatever the case may be. Anyway, it's very damn difficult, and this steely-eyed missile man just achieved it, so congratulations to you. All right, here we go. Moving on now. We have our friend Marisha Dark back here, and this one comes with its own kind of Surgeon General's warning here, so let's see what this says here. Topic: traffic stops. In bold italics. Bill, please have patience as I try to cram several years' worth of understanding and context into a brief question. You got it. I've seen you mention this several times now, and I feel compelled to push back on it, though this probably isn't something that you and I will resolve in 5 hours, let alone 5 minutes. You said you view it as lawless when people stand on their rights during traffic stop. I didn't say that they stand on their rights during traffic stop. I said what I believe, because I don't think I could have said that because I don't believe that. I think what I might have said is that people make assumptions about their rights during traffic stops, but we'll get to that. We'll get through the question here. Would I be correct in assuming that you don't think freedom of movement is a right when it comes to cars and public roads? Freedom of movement is a right. You have a Fourth Amendment right to go about your business without unreasonable search and seizure. So yes, so far so good. Unreasonable search and seizure. Yes, they don't have the right to just pull you over for nothing. Either way, set that aside for a moment, and I want you to view it from their perspective. What should they have done differently if they genuinely believed they were being tyrannized? Because in my view, this is the same as somebody asking papers, please, at an unlawful checkpoint or any other infringements that I know you wouldn't hesitate to call out, being forced to register your property with the state and follow various bureaucratic regulations on the presumption of guilt in the name of public safety when it's really just a cash grab. I'm with you on that. Not talking about someone engaged in joyriding or reckless endangerment or people who actively start violence. I'm not talking about blowing through a traffic light so much as someone who is otherwise law-abiding in the sense of the common law, who just doesn't have the right paperwork, or who spent 5 seconds too long in the left-hand lane. Paying the fine is an admission of guilt on their part and enables the state to carry out further abuses. Recall that the American Revolution was started in part because of the oppressions of the Stamp Act and the tyranny of paperwork. As you've noted several times, the legislator and the justice system aren't on our side anymore, so their day in court won't get them justice. And I can go into details sometime as to why. Maybe the last recourse is educating people on their rights to eventually overturn the law, which is what I've tried to do, but we can't even get people to agree on what a woman is anymore. So again, what should those people have done instead of resisting and standing on their rights? Well, first of all, I'm 100% behind them resisting and standing on their rights if they are legally correct. So let's talk about sovereign citizens. I don't have access to the information that people that have digested in order to use the sovereign citizen argument, but I have seen a number of people getting pulled over by the police and claiming that the police have no right to stop them, and furthermore, in many cases, not all of them, but in many cases, furthermore, that they don't need to have a license plate on their car, they don't need to register the car, don't need to have a driver's license, that they're sovereign citizens, that their Fourth Amendment right to avoid unreasonable search and seizure is basically trumps everything, if you'll pardon the expression. Now, let me make sure before I make an ass out of you and me with an assumption. Just give me 1 second here. I want to make sure I get this right. Yep. Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. This is why the Constitution is so bloody brilliant, and this is why somebody needs to educate these sovereign citizens about this thing. Let me take your side of the argument first. If I was driving down the street and there was a random stop, and I've seen these things in the streets of Los Angeles where there's like a blockade, like a roadblock, and the police are checking you for sobriety. If I were to encounter one of those, I would say, officer, I need to know what your probable cause for stopping me is, because I would like to go about my business. And in that case, I would stand there and I would stand there until they gave up, because they're not going to arrest me if I am telling them that they are pulling me over without probable cause, because they don't have probable cause on something like a sobriety checkpoint. This is actually pretty simple, but it's the entire key to the entire argument. There is no probable cause to pull me over. There's no probable cause to stop me. You are directly violating my Fourth Amendment rights, and I'm not going to say, too bad for you. I'm going to stand there and argue with them, and I'm going to say, am I being detained, officer? Am I being detained? And if I am, what is your probable cause for detaining me? Respectfully, sir, I respect the law, and I also understand it. Now, that is reasonable. However, when I see people who are doing this sovereign citizen thing, or they're drunk off their ass, or whatever the case may be, and the police come knocking and say, we want to see your driver's license, your proof of insurance, because you hit a car back there or something. And I've seen people hold up like a printout of the Fourth Amendment saying you have no right to search me or my car. I'm saying this is why the Constitution was written by geniuses and essentially quoted by idiots, because the Fourth Amendment does not say that you have the right. The Fourth Amendment does not say the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, prayers, and effects against searches and seizures shall not be violated. It doesn't say that. It says against unreasonable searches and seizures. And there's the genius, once again, of this document. Unreasonable. That's where the entire argument lives and dies. That's where you're right or wrong. It's where you're right or wrong. Unreasonable. Is it reasonable? Yes or no? That's the issue. Now, in a like I said, in a roadblock kind of situation, a sobriety check thing, that is an unreasonable search and seizure, and it's unreasonable because I have not shown any evidence of having violated any of the traffic laws. However, when you get to these people who are claiming you have no right to force me out of my car or whatever, what they are essentially saying is, I can murder somebody in broad daylight and then get in my car and drive off, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's what they're basically saying. They're basically saying I am immune in my car from any search because of my Fourth Amendment rights. But it doesn't say that. It says unreasonable. Now, this area of what's reasonable and unreasonable is where a lot of the conflict occurs, but I've never ever said that you should just eat it and just take it. Most of the police, most of the time, they are very careful, especially these days, of where that line is. However, I have seen, as I've mentioned, all these body cam things. I have also seen body cams of police who are absolutely, utterly incompetent, tyrannical, and just plain wrong. You know, walking up to people and saying, I need to see your ID. If somebody walked up to me on the street, if I was walking down the street and a policeman just stopped me and said, I need to see your ID, my response would be, why do you need to see my ID? What is your probable cause for a reasonable search and seizure? I want to go about my business. I have a Fourth Amendment right to continue about my business, and I'm protected against unreasonable search and seizures, officer, so you're going to have to provide me with the reason that you are stopping me. Otherwise, have a good day. And they won't be able to do that. And most of the time, the police understand that. A lot of times, the police are depending on you not knowing these things. For example, if I ever got pulled over for any traffic violation or whatever, and they decided that they were going to arrest me for whatever they wanted to, maybe I was drinking, maybe I was belligerent, who knows, whatever. If they said, do you mind if we search your car? My answer will be, yes, I do mind. You do not have my consent to search my car. Respectfully, sir, you do not have my consent to search my car. They have the ability to search it anyway if they clear a certain bar on probable cause. But I'm never going to consent to that, ever. I'm never going to consent to them searching my car, ever. Ever. Because sometimes the police plant things, and sometimes they don't. But that is overstepping the line. So, it doesn't seem to me to be unreasonable. The problem that I have with these people that you seem to think is my core philosophical, position of 100% supporting the power of the big state. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, there are people now out there who have gotten the idea that the Fourth Amendment, or the First for that matter, protects them from consequences. And it doesn't. It doesn't. That's why I every single time anything like this comes up, my awe, my just slack-jawed awe at the genius of the Constitution is amplified. And by the way, it's mostly the work of a guy who really did John Paul Jones wrong. That's Gouverneur Morris. He was the guy who was in charge of the Committee on Style. It was he and his small subgroup of the Founding Fathers that actually wrote the language so that anybody could understand it. Anybody could understand it. And so when we look at the law, we have terms that have gray areas in them, but we also know what they mean. For example, when you are on trial for shoplifting or first-degree murder, the burden of proof is on the state, but the state doesn't have to prove that you did it, mathematically prove that you did it. The state doesn't have to show videotape of you murdering somebody. What they have to do is their bar has to be, they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And there is a lot of argument about what that reasonable doubt is, but we all know what it means. We all know what reasonable doubt means. Can you prove this beyond a reasonable doubt? If you're saying no, you have to be able to prove it. You have to be able to have photographic evidence of somebody committing the crime or else they get to go free. Well, that's just plain nuts. That's nuts. There's no end to criminality in a case like that. You have to be able to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And sometimes mistakes occur because we're imperfect creatures living in an imperfect world with essentially a perfect system trying to keep us from ourselves. Most of the time, it works really, really well. In fact, my experience has been, both with the FAA and with police officers, that a simple admission of guilt is 95% of the way out of any kind of real trouble. Just that. You know, I haven't had a traffic ticket since I've been married. I don't think I've had one since 2012 or 13. So that's like 10 years. And for me, that is about as astonishing as the fact that I had purple horns coming out of my head. If you told me this 15 years ago that I'd go 10 years without a speeding ticket, I would have been astonished. But I haven't. So, I didn't know until recently. I've been pulled over for speeding a bunch of times. Never been pulled over for drunk driving. I have driven drunk, but I've never been pulled over for it. And I'm not proud of that. I look back on it and I think, dude, that was just nuts. That was just nuts. And I don't make that mistake again, and I haven't for 20 years. Even before I got married, I had a little portable breathalyzer thing. I'd go out on, these dates or whatever. I'd go out to clubs and hang out with people from, this organization or whatever. And I had a little pocket breathalyzer thing. And if I'd had a couple drinks, I would sit in the car and I'd blow on that thing. And if it turned out it was over the legal limit, then I would just wait. Because I'm not, I don't want to get killed, but more importantly, I don't want to kill anybody else. Okay, so what is the definition of reasonable? What is the definition of unreasonable? It's something that has to be argued and decided, and that's why we have a court system. So this idea that I'm against people standing on their rights, I'm not against people standing on their rights at all. I am against people making a stand about what they think their right is and using that to simply walk away from the consequences of lawless behavior. And furthermore, now I've heard this argument before, and it used to make more sense to me than it does. The argument is that driving isn't a right, it's a privilege. I used to think, but now I'm thinking, but going about my own business is a right, and we don't live in the town square anymore, so driving is essentially a right in the sense that I should have the right to go about my business. However, you're now dealing with, look, you didn't have to deal with this. I actually had this thought just a couple nights ago. Why did you not have to have licenses for riding a horse? Why do we have this situation now where you have to produce a driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance, and that's deemed legal, and which I happen to think actually makes sense? Why? I think it's because with the invention of the automobile, you're moving several tons of steel at extraordinarily high speeds, and the damage potential is very high. But most importantly, well, Infidel 42 said because the horse isn't drunk. That's close to what I was going to say. The horse, as it turns out, the Model 1 horse, the Mark 1 horse, has a built-in collision avoidance system. It's constantly sensing the environment, just like a Tesla is, and it is constantly making sure it doesn't run into things. So even if it does run into something, a horse doesn't weigh as much as a car, and it sure as hell doesn't move as fast as a car. And those of you who actually took physics or even know what the word physics means knows that if you double the speed, you square the energy. So you are dealing with consequences that are significantly greater. So I am 100% behind people standing up for their rights, and I'm 100% for them doing that and going to jail over it if they had to. But I also have seen a lot of abusive cops. I've seen a lot of cops that are on power trips. I've seen a lot of cops that just plain don't know. But mostly it's power trips. Let me see your ID. I don't have to show you an ID, officer. I'm walking down the street. No, you do. You have to show me an ID. No, sir, I don't. I don't have to show you an ID. I'd like to go about my business. If you have probable cause to stop me, then arrest me. But otherwise, have a good day. And that usually does it. But the flip side of that coin, Marusha, is watching people saying they don't need to have a license plate or a driver's license because they're sovereign citizens, and that somehow that makes them above the law. It's not a conservative position to say that you're above the law, and nothing in the Constitution is there to guarantee you that you can have a lawless life. On the contrary, it is there to, the Constitution is there to make life as lawful and as unobtrusive as possible, and at the same time be balanced enough so that you don't get anarchy. And that's what you get if you buy this sovereign citizen argument. I preface this by saying this. I'm going to say it again. I've never had anybody explain to me what the argument is. I know there's no value, that the argument is invalid, because basically you don't get the right to do whatever the hell you want to without consequences. However, I don't know the argument that they're making, but I do know that a lot of people are basically saying, I don't have to stop, I don't have to obey the law, you can't pull me over, you can't arrest me, I don't need a license, I don't need any of this stuff because I'm a sovereign citizen. Where does that end? Can you drive your car through somebody's fence because you're a sovereign citizen? No, well, that's their property. Okay, well, can you drive your car across the median on a public street because you're a sovereign citizen and take out a tree in the middle there? Where does it end? No. Laws are laws. And it is, in fact, a pretty well-balanced system. It works really pretty well. Of all the body cam things I've talked about, both in terms of people who were disrespecting the law, and on the other side of that argument, policemen that were overusing, abusing, or just plain don't know the limits of their authority, those are outliers. For every one of those videos, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of transactions that happen every single day very smoothly. Most of the time, a decent attitude, well, virtually all of the time, unless you've got a policeman who's really, really got a bug about something, and those exist, but they're not very often. Most of the time, just fundamental respect is enough. And I, as usual, got sidetracked. I was saying I hadn't gotten a ticket in 10 years. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I finally understood something that had been part of every traffic stop that I'd ever been a part of. I've probably been pulled for speeding, I don't know, maybe 7 times in my life. Most of it when I was 16, 17, 18 and slowed down, but maybe 6, 7 speeding tickets, I guess. Not crazy a lot, but enough, you know. All right, so come on, Billy, you can do it. Speeding tickets. Oh, I didn't know why the first thing that a policeman does when he comes up to your car door is say, "Hey, how are you, sir?" "I'm fine." "Officer, how are you?" "Fine." "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I never knew why they asked that question. I just thought it was just standard. It turns out that the reason they ask, "Why do you know why I pulled you over?" is they're trying to find out immediately up front whether you are lying to them. John Pershing says it's an attitude check. Yes. If you're doing 90 in a 45 zone and you get pulled over and a police officer says, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" And you said, "No, sir, I don't know why you pulled me over." You're lying. You're starting out by lying. It gives them a pretty clear idea of what they're dealing with. And like with the FAA, I'm not going into that story again, but I had to, because I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago where I had a little run-in with the FAA, which was my fault. I was wrong. But I do remember my last speeding ticket, which wasn't a speeding ticket. I was in my new Camaro, 2012 or 13, and I know exactly where I was. I was going up the hill down by where Hughes Field used to be, up by Loyola University there, and I got this first new car in my entire life ever, and I'm powering up this hill, and I think the speed limit was probably 35 or something, and this guy lights up behind me, and I pull over, and he walks up to the car. He says, "How are you, sir?" I said, "I'm fine, sir, thank you." He said, Do you know why you pulled over?" I said, "Yes, sir, I was speeding." "How fast do you think you were going?" I said, "Well, when I saw your lights, I looked down, I was doing 52 in a 35 zone." He said, "Okay, don't do that anymore." "No, sir, I will not. I will slow down." "You have a good day." "You have a good day too, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I really do. It's very nice of you." Boom. Boom. Bam. So, I hope that answered it for you. I don't have any problem with people standing on their rights. I do have problems with people having temper tantrums and thinking that they're standing on their rights. Way Juarez. Hello, Ray. Awesome kind of a avatar you got there. At least it seems awesome with what's left of my eyesight here. Hello, Bill! Exclamation point. Hello, Ray. Hello, Ray. I'll give you 2 exclamation points. I'll raise you. Call you and I'll raise you. I don't really know what show this falls under, so I once again grace you with miscellaneous info. That's the best kind. In Micronesia, there's a sunken Japanese fleet that has been slowly dumping oil into the waters as the barrels rust. Interestingly, 2 cool things have happened. Divers are volunteering to clean the area up of the oil without disturbing the rest of the wrecks, and scientists have found organisms that are breaking down refined oil into less toxic compounds. I guess your quote of "maybe the Earth needs more plastic" is actually more true than you think. Climate alarmists will keep going nuts about how the Earth is going to die, but Mother Nature strikes again to show off that if there is an abundance of something that can be used as a food, nature will adapt something nearby to consume it. Yes. Do you think this will be widely publicized, or will it just be a memory hold in efforts to keep people on edge? And here's a link. The rest of the series of P.S. Gaijin, the War Thunder Debs, ban anyone posting leaked info and cannot legally use the information, both due to military documents being classified, but also because of the copyright law that you mentioned on Thursday. Have a great evening, Bill, and good luck on your script writing. Your work is damn good. That's very kind of you, Ray. That was absolutely a pleasure. That entire experience, unlike what I have to deal with Eric Blake and Marusha Dark, this was an actual joy. Okay, so if you look at, was it Prince William Sound? I remember when the Exxon Valdez went aground. And I'm fairly sure that was the worst accident that's happened in U.S. shores, and may have been the worst oil spill ever, but it's up there. So that happened in, I want to say, Prince William Sound, and it was up in Alaska. And they took this super tanker and just ran it ashore because the captain was drunk, I think. And so you see everything. By the way, you don't see a lot of these anymore. Last time I remember an oil spill of any significant size was Deepwater Horizon, and that was, 2009, 10, 11? Obama's first term, I want to say. Okay, so yes, it's horrible. And you see all of this stuff. You see the kind of the light brownish stuff floating on the water, and then it washes ashore, and then it's just like somebody's just poured tar over everything, because that's exactly what happens. You see all the seabirds covered with all this, and they're trying to wipe down these otters and birds, and the whole coast for miles is just covered with this black goop, and they go in there and they try and clean it up and all the rest of it. Well, I don't know how long after the spill it was, but it was not much more than 10 years, so that's been 20, 30 years now at least. Is that true? No, it can't be AOC. That's a joke, surely. Okay, so here's the thing. If you go up there now and you try to look for the oil, you won't find any. They did do a lot of cleaning up, but you can't clean up oil. You're not going to take a toothbrush to every single one of the pebbles out there. It basically breaks down. When I was just a wee lad in Bermuda growing up, 1989 for the Exxon Valdez, I learned the miracle from my dad. This is one of the lessons my father gave me. He taught me about the miracle of Lestoil. Those of you who are a certain age may recognize that name. Most of you probably don't. Lestoil, that's how it's Lestoil. Lestoil is a cleaning solution, and it's not in common use anymore. I don't even know if they still make it or not. But as a child in Bermuda so that would have been 63, 64, up until about 70, the hotel had all along we had a little beach there that was the hotel beach in a little cove, and at regular, 2 or 3 places around the beach, there was a bunch of old rags, torn up old towels, and bottles of Lestoil, because all the time in Bermuda there would be these little black floating things of tar. And I just grew up with them. I never even thought about what they were. They just there. And these little tar balls, they're all about the same size, about that big, would just float in, and they'd float up on the shore, and you'd step on them, and then you'd get tar on your foot. And you couldn't get that stuff off with soap or water or gasoline. Only thing that would take it off is Lestoil. So I just grew up with it. I thought it was like seaweed, just tar and seaweed. That's what's out there. Well, what the tar was oil that had been spilled and had basically just stayed out at sea for years or decades. And I don't see tar anymore. Natasha and I went to Santa Barbara several years ago, and I remember seeing a little bit of tar there. I remember it being enough for me to comment on. And the reason I saw tar off the coast of on the beach at Santa Barbara is because Santa Barbara, that area is constantly naturally leaking oil. It's not an oil head that's leaking. The oil is so close to the surface there. The Indians knew about this. I think they used it as a fuel source. So there's some oil leaking from out of the ground in the area of Santa Barbara, gets to the surface, clots up, and then goes ashore as tar. And I remember pointing out, Natasha, look at that, there's tar. I haven't seen tar on a beach in 40 years. So yes, again, it is much cleaner now than it was when I was a kid, like everything else, like the air quality in Los Angeles, or the idling of cars. People my age remember when you would sit in traffic, and Natasha says it's still a case in Moscow. You'd sit in traffic and you'd be surrounded by cars, and out of the tailpipes, little puffs of blue smoke, puffs of blue smoke, and you smell it, and you're breathing it in all the time. And that, by the way, was leaded fuel, so you're breathing in a significant amount of lead. Somebody has said that leaded fuel, they used to put lead in fuel to reduce knocking and make the fuel burn smoother. Somebody did some research on this. I don't know how much quality there is to this, but they estimated that amount of leaded fuel, that the total amount of lead ingested by people my age may have cost the entire Earth an average 7 or 8 IQ points. That's really significant, because if it turns out that I lost 7 or 8 IQ points because of the traffic stuff, then you put that back, and I'm easily in the low 90s. I mean, easily. So, yes, nature breaks it down, and plastics are tougher than oil. It did smell good. I do remember Lestoil smelling really, really good, because basically, I'm gonna hear it from people who really know what they're talking about. And I understand that there is an enormous difference between a hydrocarbon and a carbohydrate. However, I also know that we're dealing with carbon and hydrogen, and so these are essentially the elements that make up food. Now, they have been able to grow bacteria that eat oil, and I'm sure they're working on bacteria that will eat plastic. Plastic is a problem. But the plastic problem that we face is an engineering problem. It's not a stop the world problem. It's not we did a show on Right Angle where they're trying to make Lego bricks out of recycled plastic. Well, it doesn't work, because it's got to have that tension has to be perfect for it to snap in and still be able to pull out. If it's not tight enough, the bricks just fall apart. If it's too tight, you can't separate them. So, anyway, yes, the Earth is a tough old bird. It has gone through unbelievable. Here's a great example. During the Gulf War, there was a great deal of concern about, well, do we really want to fight a war with all these oil heads here, in Kuwait and stuff? I mean, what if somebody accidentally hits one and it starts to burn? Well, that'd be bad. What we hadn't counted on was when Saddam starts retreating out of Kuwait back to Iraq, he sets fire to the single richest oil field in the world. And you've seen pictures from the Gulf War in 1990-91. The sky is just black. It's a vision of hell. There's not only are there raging oil fires everywhere, but the soldiers are covered in this black soot. It's just plain ecological catastrophe. And so we went in there after the shooting was over. We put out the fires on the oil wells, and now it's essentially recovered. It's recovered because the oil breaks down. David Boutet says Carl Sagan claimed that there would be nuclear winter, and this is why I lost an enormous amount of respect for Carl Sagan. Enormous amount of respect for him, because he really was a significant feature of my intellectual development, Carl Sagan. He really was. I worshiped the guy, and I read everything he wrote. But Carl Sagan later admitted that he knew that this claim about a nuclear winter was a lie, but he went along with it and lent his enormous prestige. He was America's scientist. He's what Neil deGrasse Tyson wants to be, except Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of an idiot. He said that he thought the risk of nuclear war was so great that it justified him lying about the consequences. And I say to myself, now, Carl, you should know better than that. You should have known better than that, right? You spent your entire career explaining to goofballs like me how science is designed to take human opinion and human faults out of the system. And you were so successful at doing that, and then you just plain ignored your own advice, and you didn't prevent a nuclear war. All you did was discredit science and scientists. And that was the beginning of my basic realization that science works very well. But the reason science works well is because scientists are, if not as egotistical as anybody else, I suspect significantly more egotistical than anybody else. So, yes, the Earth recovers just fine. And this is a problem for them because they don't have any other reason to keep people scared enough to do what they tell them to do. I suspect that in this crisis that's coming, I don't just suspect, I'd bet a significant amount of money that I don't have on the fact that we will start to see climate lockdowns, that they will try to basically say we're going to have to shut down this city for 3 days or whatever because the carbon dioxide levels are just crazy. They're going to start playing around with this. And when they made carbon dioxide officially, I think the EPA did it, I want to say, 10, 15 years ago now. When you classify carbon dioxide as a pollutant, then all bets are off from that point. Because if carbon dioxide is a pollutant, then I'm polluting the atmosphere right this second. It's insanity. And I think there's no question that the planet is warmer than it was even... I got here in 1988. In 1988 in Los Angeles, been here since 88. And for the first 7 or 8 years in Los Angeles, it would start to snow in the mountains in November. And we'd start going skiing in, let's say, November. On a late year, it might be last week of November, maybe even early December. And we'd have snow until February or March, sometimes last April. Natural snow up in the foothills in the, was it the San Gabriel Mountains, I guess? And when I got here in 1988, those snow caps were on those mountains for 4 or 5 months. And we used to go skiing up there all the time. I haven't seen snow stay on those mountains for 10 years now. Parenthetically, and perhaps related to this, in fact, I'd be surprised if it wasn't related to this, the air quality is much, much better. But It's certainly warmer than it used to be. When I first started here in '88 and I was a limo driver, I worked the night shift and I would come out to my car. This is in Los Angeles. This is a big deal for a guy who grew up in Bermuda and Florida. I come out to my car at 2 o'clock in the morning and it'd be covered in frost. Never seen that before. Never lived with it before. I haven't seen that in 15, 20 years. So I think it's definitely warmer. However, it's also greener. Earth has never been this green. Bert showed a picture. He was doing because Bert looks at data, and he looked at this so-called hockey stick data and all the rest of this global warming catastrophe data, and he says there's nothing there. And I trust him. I trust him with my life because I flew his airplanes, and I trust the math that he did on that. And if he says that there's nothing there, I believe him. He doesn't have a dog in this fight as far as controlling people goes. But one of the things he said was, I was with him in Oshkosh, and it was the anniversary of the Very Easy, and he showed a bunch of pictures from when he first brought the Very Easy out there. I want to say it was 40-year anniversary, and he's showing pictures of Oshkosh at Oshkosh. Because I'm not going to call it AirVenture because it's not. It's Oshkosh. And he said, by the way, look at all these fields. Look at the fields that your airplanes are on right now. Look at what they look like 40 years ago. They're brown dirt. Now it's green grass. It was brown dirt. And the reason it's green grass now is because there's enough carbon dioxide for these plants to actually grow. The planet has never been this healthy in my lifetime, he said, and I completely agree, he's right. I know for an absolute certain fact, I don't want to be on the wrong side of this issue. Of all the issues that are out there, this is the one I'm most worried about being on the wrong side of. However, when they tell you that we are facing a global catastrophe if carbon dioxide gets to 450 parts per million or 460 or whatever they're saying, and 80 million years ago it was 3,000 parts per million, and no one is denying that, then how the hell did we get from 3,000 parts per million back down to 300 parts per million? And it didn't kill the Earth. It made the center of America, made Kansas into a tropical paradise. There were thousands and thousands of species, and now there's nothing but grass there. If you were living there when the dinosaurs in that inland sea there, and you said 80 million years from now, carbon dioxide level is going to fall below 400 parts per million, and all of this stuff's going to die, and the ocean's is going to just dry up. It's just going to be a barren plain with just some grass on it, the size of 5 states. If you told that to the dinosaurs, they would say the catastrophe is that we're going to get carbon dioxide levels so low. And there you go. So what I know from the fact that carbon dioxide levels were 3,000 parts per million 80 million years ago is, number one, it got to 3,000 parts per million without automobiles doing it. That's the first thing. Much more importantly, it recovered from 3,000 parts per million without any help whatsoever. And even more importantly than that, the feedback mechanism that protects the Earth is lopsided. It's not symmetrical. There has never been a case where the Earth's temperature got so hot that there was danger of life extinction on Earth, because the hotter it gets, I know this is going to come as a shock, the hotter it gets, the more water evaporates. The more water evaporates, the more clouds there are in the sky. The more clouds there are in the sky, the higher the albedo, which is the reflectivity of the Earth, is. And so the hotter it gets, the more clouds there are. The clouds are whiter than the ground. They reflect more of heat and light back out into space, and this is called a feedback loop. So the hotter it gets, the cloudier it gets. The cloudier it gets, the more reflective the planet gets. That cools the planet, and there you go. So the top end is pretty safe, but the bottom end isn't. We damn near lost the Earth because carbon dioxide levels became too low. If they get too low during Snowball Earth, it is conceivable that carbon dioxide levels could get so low that all plant life will die, and then you've got a sterile ball. That's it. You got a sterile rock. That was a genuine risk, and Snowball Earth lasted for millions of years. We damn near lost the Earth because carbon dioxide levels got so low that we nearly lost plant growth. Now, this is all scientific fact, and even the climate alarmists are not having this discussion. They're not denying this because they can't. They're just assuming that people don't know, and they're right. Lord Bio says phytoplankton in the oceans will save it. Yes. Things that have happened to Earth, I forget what the number is now, but I think that, oh, you can do it, Bill, come on. That the Chicxulub impact released, I think it was something like 5 trillion Tsar bombas worth of energy. 5 trillion of them. Absolutely blew. It turned the entire Western Hemisphere, caught fire. North America caught fire. The whole continent caught fire. Frickin' asteroid came in at a real low angle, set all that. If it coming straight in, the damage would have been much more contained. It splashes like a shotgun blast from the Gulf of Mexico northwest, and lit fires from Jamaica to Alaska, and everything died. The big stuff died, and it was genuine winter for probably a century, and then it stopped. Then it cleared up, and then the ocean swallowed up the crater, and now we went through most of the entire period of the scientific age completely unaware that it was even there, completely unaware that it had happened. Only reason we knew it happened was we got guys out there digging for dinosaur bones and stuff, and other archaeologists and so on, geologists, and they're digging around for dinosaur bones, and they find out, holy cow, what's this? There's this tiny little white line right on this particular layer of sediment. It's very, very thin, and it's, what is that? Is that chalk? No, it's not chalk. It's iridium. Well, that's a little weird because there's not a lot of iridium in the Earth's crust. How the hell did this iridium get here? Well, it turns out iridium is common in meteorites. And the fact that there's an iridium layer around virtually the entire planet, going back about 65 million years ago, is saying that 65 million years ago, a great deal of iridium was deposited on the Earth, and it was very thin, which means it didn't last very long. And that's how they worked the whole thing backwards. And they put that together with the extinctions that they were seeing, large animal extinctions all around the same time. And that this idea about asteroid impacts taking out the dinosaurs is relatively new. It's 30 years old. It's not accepted science. It was, in fact, when they first started talking about it in the 70s, those guys were considered crackpots. Shoemaker and Levy were both early advocates of this idea that asteroid impacts cause extinctions. People prior to that had thought it was volcanic eruptions. So, and by the way, 85 million years ago, as a.k.a. Woody Fool says, a.k.a. 65 million years ago, that's less than a century. It's actually more than a century, believe it or not. So, 80 million years ago, parts per million, 3,000. Inside of America, the inland sea where Kansas is under a mile of water. That's 80 million years ago. 80,000 years ago, carbon dioxide is probably down around 170 parts per million. And where there was once a mile of water, now there's 2 miles thick of ice. And we had nothing to do with either of these wild extremes. Now, I'm a reasonable fella. I'm not saying I would like to see sea levels rise enough for there to be an inland ocean, but I am saying that this whole hysteria that we've got 7 years before the Earth dies is just plain BS, and they know it. And we have an entire generation that is as afraid of that as we were of Soviet nuclear weapons, and unlike this climate crisis, those things were real. It's an interesting little thing. Ace Affinity says this is the Earth at a time when the dinosaurs roamed a lush and fertile planet. A piece of rock just 6 miles wide changed all that. It hit with the full force of 10,000 nuclear. What's 10,000? I'm quite sure it was more than that. A trillion tons of dirt and rock hurled into the atmosphere, creating a suffocating blanket of dust that the sun was powerless to penetrate for 1,000 years. It wasn't a century, it was 1,000 years. It's happened before. It will happen again. It's just a question of when. And that is from the great scientific mind of Charlton frickin' Heston, who knew what he was talking about. So yes, it recovers. Life is and the reason it recovers is because of life. That's why it's here. The Earth protects life, but life protects the Earth. If it weren't for life, then there wouldn't be Chicxulub. then the Earth would have hit one of these extremes. But when it starts to get warmer, not only are there more clouds, but the warmer it gets, the more carbon dioxide there is, the more plants grow, because plants say, hey, look, there's more food. So the Earth has never been this green in recorded history. It's been greener, but not in recorded history. The Earth has never been this green. It's green because carbon dioxide levels are slightly higher than they were 30 years ago. So plants are growing, and they've got more to eat, which means that they're growing faster, they need less water, they need less fertilizer, and they're pulling the carbon dioxide out and exchanging it for oxygen. Now, this trend line is increasing slightly. That's true. Seems to be true. But we are not... See, if we were at the upper limit of historical temperatures, I'd be scared out of my mind. Right? If Earth had never been here before, I'd be with them 100%. But the Earth has not only been here before, it's in a state of constant motion. We are not particularly far off the mean. We're not right up at the high limits of the high temperature, not near the low limits of the temperature. We're more or less within a standard deviation of the mean temperature of what the Earth has been, and they know this. They know this. And the fact that they're not saying this, and the fact that they're saying you better do what we say or else the Earth is going to die, is telling me it's not about science at all. It's about something else, and I think we all know that this is pretty much true. Oh boy. What are we doing? Time-wise, I'm beginning to feel myself fading a bit here. 2 hours. How about if we go another half hour or so? How about that? All right. Let's see. Joe Roth. Everybody gets a first helping before anybody gets a second helping. That's my rules here. So let's see what we got here from our friend Joe Roth. Hi, Bill. Thank you for taking time to read my question. Well, you're very welcome, Joe, and thank you for being so kind about it. I enjoy your right-angle segments with Stephen Scott. As much as I'm sure Scott Ott is a genuine and nice person, I often think his give the benefit of the doubt, turn the other cheeks, devil advocate, go along to get along approach to handing our ruthless, criminal, and nasty politicians' opponents is a bit naive. I think this attitude amongst so many conservatives is why we lose so much and why they keep abusing us. Many conservatives don't fight. We always want to be nice and always give the benefit of the doubt to avoid confrontation. I'm of the belief that we need to start hitting back hard and nasty and start throwing some lethal punches. Otherwise, the left will just keep on doing what they're doing. For example, Scott Ott said in one of his right-angle segments that he doesn't think the 2020 election was fraudulent and that Trump lost fair and square. Although I am curious to hear what he logically has to say about all of the evidence to the contrary, and it happened right before our eyes. Again, I think he's going along to get along like so many others. That's why I'm thinking that Kevin McCarthy being ousted as Speaker, as chaotic as it may seem, may be a good thing, because someone in Congress actually had the guts to hold him accountable for broken promises, and now we have a chance to get a real conservative as a Speaker, so we can finally hold some people accountable. What say you, Bill? I'm not going to speak about Scott Ott specifically, because Scott Ott has been a balancing voice on a number of issues, and there's nothing worse than having somebody be I have the same problem with my wife, and that is there's nothing more annoying than having somebody tell you something and finding out that you're wrong. Now, I don't think I'm wrong about these issues, and I don't think you're wrong about them either, Joe, but that's why we have disagreement, because it keeps people honest. So I'm not going to mention Scott by name. I'm just going to say that it is that there is a that it is possible to have, let me rephrase this. Prior to 2020, I had consistent belief in the integrity of the FBI, the electoral system, the CDC. I thought the CDC was one of the great organizations in the world. I thought the CDC was one of the best things that humans had ever come up with. I had a great deal of confidence in all of these things. And over the course of 2020 and 2021, and in the interim time, I've seen enough evidence to convince me that evidence, not hearsay, evidence, that that none of this is in fact true, that there are enormous gaps between what I assumed was true versus what is actually true. This whole conspiracy idea of, people controlling the world is a violation of Occam's razor, but Occam's razor doesn't mean doesn't say that in every single case the simplest explanation is the likely one. It says that in most cases it's the way to bet. To me, the most convincing evidence of voter fraud in 2020 is what happened in front of everybody's eyes, and which there is no denying. 5 or 6 states simply stopped counting. It's never happened before. It's never, ever happened. They stopped for the night, they went to bed, and when we woke up, the numbers were different. They have plenty of good reasons for why they said this is the case, but it's never, ever, ever, ever happened before. That, to me, is the single greatest piece of evidence, is the fact, and nobody's debating this, that 6 states stopped counting, and that the 6 states that stopped counting, and this is the part that really puts the nails in the coffin on this argument, is not only did these 6 states stop counting, but they were the 6 states that had to change, and none of the states that were out of the equation stopped. Florida didn't stop counting, California didn't stop counting, New York didn't stop counting. The battleground states stopped counting. They all stopped counting on the same night, and none of this had ever happened before. If one state had stopped counting, that would have been really quite remarkable. But for all of them, that is honestly, how do you explain that? How do you explain it? How do you explain it? I'm not going to get into all of these details, but a lot of times when you're dealing with whether something is true or not, a lot of the time you can tell about how good an opponent's argument is by the strength of their rebuttals. So, for example, when that, those numbers, red line for Trump, blue line for Biden, and then at 3 o'clock in the morning on the night of the election, there's a sudden jump in the blue line, and now Biden's ahead for the rest of it. Happened in all of those 6 states at about the same time. That alone is extraordinarily compelling evidence. What is the explanation for this? Well, the explanation for this was that this was an input error, that they made a mistake in entering the numbers. And that was enough for people, including people who don't believe there was any of it. That was an input error. My response to that would be twofold. Number one, an input error of that magnitude. First of all, you're telling me that the election of the President of the United States comes down to one person entering numbers manually into a system, and that is going to be the number we go with? That this thing is capable, that it is a single point of failure, one operator error? Somebody typed in 60 million when they meant to type in 6 million, and therefore, so that's doubtful. The fact that it happened in 5 or 6 states at the same time is doubtful to the 8th power. But much more importantly is the fact that if this was an input error and they said it was corrected, then we would see this sudden jump where the input error occurred, and then we'd see a drop when the correction took place. But that didn't happen. When they stopped counting in Georgia, in Atlanta, they said it was because of a burst water main. That was what was on the news. Why aren't we getting the results? Why haven't they called Florida? Well, we haven't gotten the results in from Atlanta yet. Really? Why not? No, there's a burst water main at the State Farm Arena. I keep wanting to say Allstate. I can never remember. I keep saying I can never remember. People tell me this time, I swear to God, I'm going to memorize it. In any event, but burst water main. That's why we can't call it, because this enormous counting center is underwater. Okay, then show me video footage of the burst water main. They didn't do it because it didn't happen. And they afterwards said, no, it just turned out it was an overflowing toilet. You didn't say you stopped counting because of an overflowing toilet. You said you stopped counting because of a burst water main, that you had to basically carry the ballots up onto tables because the place was flooding. Where's the evidence of this? That's evidence. That's evidence. When you ask them this, they just look at you like you're from Mars. Seriously. And when they did the 60 Minutes thing, Bill, you ought to look at this. It's really debunked your idea that the election was stolen. I look at this, and the guy was being asked by the 60 Minutes guy. He said, "Yes, this thing about the video of these guys pulling these giant containers of votes out from under the table after everybody left. No, that's standard operating procedure. Trump is completely out of line by saying that this is evidence of fraud. This is, and I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, the entire idea of election observers is so that they keep an eye on the ballots. You've got Democrats and Republicans both watching. When people start pulling ballots out from underneath the table, that is breaking the chain of what's the word? It's not provenance. It's like the chain of custody, right? And they said they were going home. That's was chain of custody. Okay, so they said we have to shut down. So all of you observers leave. And when the observers left, if then they had turned off the lights and everybody gone home, you would at least have an argument. But that's not what happened. That's not what happened. Oh, well, the 60 Minutes thing said, look, those boxes were sealed. When the observers left, those boxes were sealed. Then my response to that would be, well, when did you unseal them in front of the public? When did you unseal them? Because people are doing something. I'm looking at them. There's an empty room. There used to be a bunch of observers. They're not there anymore. So what is the explanation for this? But the broken water main is prima facie evidence that you're being lied to. It's first order evidence that something fishy is going on. First order evidence. You claimed it was because of this. Yes. Well, show me a burst water main is serious enough to shut down this counting, serious enough to evacuate the building, so there will be evidence of a burst water main. Show me the evidence. Turns out, no, that wasn't. We were wrong about that. Wasn't a burst water main at all. It was a toilet overflow. The news didn't say that you stopped counting because there was a toilet overflow. The news said you stopped counting because there was a burst water main. Yeah, well, that was a miscommunication. So if it was just a toilet overflow, like you say, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's just say you're telling the truth. Yes, absolutely. It was just a toilet overflow. Then why did you stop counting for an overflowed toilet? Because toilet overflows occupy an area just a couple yards in diameter. That's not something to... You don't even shut down a bathroom over that, let alone the entire building. And when they did this on 60 Minutes, they said, no, the whole thing is completely legitimate. We got a call from the guy who was in charge of the elections. He said, I want you to stop counting for the night. And so we stopped counting, and then we picked it up again. And apparently I'm the only person in America saying, what's the name of the individual that called you and told you to stop counting? Who was on the other end of that line? Who made that decision? And who told you when to start counting again? Who? Who did it? Who did it? Name the person who made the call. Name the person. What person did it? Nope. They're not going to do it. They're not going to name it. We just got a call, and then we got a call to start counting again. You got a call to start counting again? Yeah, so we started counting again at 2 o'clock in the morning. Then why didn't you invite the observers back? That's just in one center. So, look, that to me is compelling evidence. It's compelling first order evidence. There's no question about the water main, and there's no question that 5 or 6 states stopped counting for no reason whatsoever. That's never happened before, and it hasn't happened since, except in Arizona, and that got pretty dicey, So yes, something is going on. And look, I had to go through it, and many of you have had to go through it, and I think some people just don't want to go through it. What they don't want to go through is the pain, the psychic pain of realizing that all these things that you believe in, like the integrity of these systems, is wrong. That's a hard thing to face. That's a brutal thing to face. It's a terrible thing to face. Now, similarly, some people don't see any evidence of Joe Biden's mental decline. They say, it's just, just making a big deal out of, a couple of stammers, and people make mistakes and stammer and so on. I don't know how you come to that conclusion, but I think that Biden's mental state is essential. If you admit that Biden is mentally incapable of doing the job, then that has to open the door to the fact that there's something fundamentally wrong with the system where the president is incapable of doing the job. Somebody's doing the job of the president. And once you open that door, then all of the other doors, like the CDC and the vaccine and Fauci and the election, all those doors open when you make that admission. So you can't even really say that Joe Biden doesn't know where he is. It's got to be, he has to be just a little confused. Because if he's mentally incapable of being president, then somebody is being president, and we know it's not the vice president because she's in the same boat. She doesn't have the excuse of old age. This is evidence. No one's debating this. No one's debating that Epstein is dead. There's no question he's dead. Now, whether you believe that he hanged himself during the 13 minutes that a video camera suddenly just went out, solid state, brand new webcam kind of thing, just plain broke. That's extremely unlikely, but it's possible. However, the explanation is that the camera broke for 13 minutes, during which this guy hanged himself, and then the camera started working again. Now, that's impossible. It's not unlikely. It's impossible. And that's what they're giving you as that's the official story. That's not what I'm saying their story is. That's their story. What happened to him? Well, he hanged himself. Well, wasn't he on suicide watch? Well, yeah. Okay, so where was the person? Well, we didn't have a person. We had a video camera on him. Fantastic. Trot out the video of him hanging himself. Well, camera broke. The camera broke. Yeah, camera broke just not long before he hanged himself. Okay, take me in there so I can examine this broken camera. Well, here's the thing about that. The camera actually started working again. Oh, really? Yeah. So the camera broke, yeah. And then in the space of 13 minutes, he hangs himself. We don't have any video of that. Nope, it just broke. But now if I go to examine the broken camera, I won't find it broken because it's working again. Yep. You know what this is? I'll tell you what this is exactly like. This is precisely like Michael Jackson being interviewed saying that he's never had any surgery on his face and that those 3 blue-eyed kids are his biological children, which he did. He said it again and again. He just plain said it, and he stuck to his guns, and people believe him. It's impossible. It's impossible. But he simply kept on lying, and he didn't change his story. So, okay. Now, I'm not an enormous fan of Cat Williams. In fact, I wouldn't even say I'm a big fan of Cat Williams. However, Cat Williams, stand-up comedian, did about a 15-minute rant on Michael Jackson. And that was one of the funniest and absolutely the most honest thing I think I've ever heard on stage. That is fully hilarious. It's filthy. The language is completely filthy. But Cat Williams' rant on Michael Jackson before he died is astonishingly good. He just plain dismantles it. He's got a line, something about, I keep in my house, I keep, like a nightcap or something for women, for bitches. When bitches come over, I got like a nightcap so it doesn't affect their Jerry curl, something along those lines, right? And I said, I don't like that stuff, but bitches do. So he's saying, this is what I provide for my house. It's just Michael's house has got all these merry-go-rounds and petting zoos and all the things that children love. He's just banging it down, man. And it's just plain hilarious. He's really, 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 really funny in that. And so what do you say? There are people who are utterly convinced Michael Jackson is innocent, and you cannot change their minds because they have an emotional investment in the outcome. It's not up to evidence anymore because the evidence is overwhelming, especially when these last 2 guys came out. This documentary I saw a year or 2 ago about three guys, maybe 3 boys. It's not even up for discussion. It's just plain proven, but you will never get Michael Jackson fans to believe it. Even if you sat them down Clockwork Orange style and propped their eyes open and made them watch that video, they're not going to believe it. And that's because some things are too emotionally difficult for some people to believe. And so they simply don't. They just don't. They just say, nope, nope. I've got, you've given me a reasonable explanation. Well, we've given you an explanation. What was the explanation again? Toilet overflow. Okay, good enough for me. Okay, okay. I don't know why. Look, it takes a certain amount of courage to have to face unpleasant news, and some people refuse to do that. One of the reasons I'm so open about whatever medical procedures I might be having, I don't have a ton of them. You have this nice scar here because I had a significant dime-sized piece of, actually, I was going to say precancerous cell, but it was a basal cell or something. It had been there for years, and I've been checked by a dermatologist twice a year. Finally, I had to say to the guy, "Do you want to take a closer look at this?" "Yeah, maybe we will. We'll do a little sample." "Yeah, it's going to have to come out." Now, the reason this scar is so prominent is not because of the surgery. It's because I wouldn't stop picking at it when it was healing. That's my fault. That's on me. But once I was convinced that this wasn't just, age spots like the rest of these damn things here. If I give yourself different lighting, you would not believe how different I look. It's frightening. It's like a freaking horror movie. But once I realized it was there, it's like, okay, let's get it. Let's do it now. I had a skin cancer thing on my back, and they took a hunk of my back out the size of a sushi roll, and I was fine with that. It's like, okay, let's just get it done. I don't want it to get worse. I don't like it, but I'm not going to run from it. Let's just do it. But there are people who will not go to the doctor. They've got symptoms and they know it. And so I try to say to these people when I have something like this, when I had heart palpitations, I still have tachycardia. I wake up constantly. I think there's an earthquake. It happens to me pretty much every other night. What the fuck? What's going on? Oh, it's this. Now, that's enough to scare you, but back in 2011, I went and took a look at it, and the guy said, well, Bill, you have a lot of adrenaline in your system and so on. The good news is we'll put you on the treadmill, and the more load we put on your heart, the more your heart stabilizes. That's good. Usually people who got blockage, the more load we put on the heart, the worse things get. For you, you're just you got like a high idle, And, okay. And that gave me a great deal of relief. Because I didn't have the best guy in the country, but I had a good guy. I had a top cardiologist. I was paying through the nose for this insurance, and that's why we pay through the nose for your insurance. And this guy basically gave me the radioactive dye test, and when I called for the results, I've told this story 100 times, I called for the results. I had the test done on a Friday afternoon. He said, we'll have the results for you by Friday. Call our office around 4:30 or 5. And I did, and he said, he's gone home for the weekend. And I thought, great, I get to sit on this for the whole weekend. So I'm sitting here wondering what the hell I found. I'm going to turn into a spider, or maybe I'm going to become, quarter-inch high, or maybe I'll grow to some giant size or something. All this radiation tracking stuff they pumped in me, which I just thought was really cool, by the way. And then I finally have to wait through the weekend, having watched this thing escalate, stethoscope, something a little weird there. Let's just get you a quick EKG. Lie down, get the EKG. Yeah. Let's get an echocardiogram. I want a echocardiogram while we're getting the EKG. There's something a little funny. I want you to wear this monitor for 24 hours. Yeah. This is all my basic general practitioner. Yeah. I'm going to send you over to a cardiologist. Now, I'm getting progressively more interested, and so I finally go in and have this radioactive dye test done, and I have to wait through the weekend, and I call the office on Monday, and I had some interactions with the woman there, the head nurse. Hi, it's Bill. Oh, hey, how are you, Bill? Yeah, listen, I wasn't able to get the results on Friday. Can you find out what the results are? Hang on a second. And she's gone. And she says she's gone for 2 minutes or something. Comes back. And she says, yeah, I just talked to Dr. He said, He said to tell you, kid, you're going to live forever. Don't bother me anymore. And I thought, sweet. Had another test done. Natasha and I both had one done, I want to say about 3-4 years ago. Something like that. And we got off the treadmill, and was more than just a, it's more than just a stethoscope thing. It was a heart health test. And so I would have been, I don't know, I was probably 59 or 60 maybe, I guess, somewhere around there. And I get off the thing, and I said, how's it look? He says, you have a 1 in 1,000 chance of having a heart attack this year. That's the state that your heart's in right now. My estimation is your chance of having a heart attack within the next several years is 1 in 1,000. It's not 0, but 1 in 1,000 is pretty damn good odds, That's a 10-sided dice rolling 0 4 times. That's I can live with those odds. Now, obviously, as time goes on, those odds are going to increase. And there's not a damn thing I can do about that. And the older I get, the more likely it's going to become. But you see, there's another side to this, and that is the older I get, the more life I manage to squeeze out of this life. You see what I'm saying? It's a good deal. Castellan says, so you're saying there's a chance? Yes, there's a chance. Yeah, there's a chance, a good chance I could. There's not a good chance. There's not even a slim chance. There's a statistically insignificant but definitely detectable chance that I could just keel over right now. Although I have to say, given the stress levels lately, I suspect those numbers have gone up significantly because I can feel it. Nevertheless, 3 times Bill, not 4, you're in much more danger than you thought. Well, 1 out of 10, if I do it once, it's 1 out of 10. If I do it twice, you're right, 3 times. Holy cow, I better get back. I need to end this show right now. I'm going to go home and lie down, and I'm going to get driven home in an ambulance. I say, why take chances? But it's self-induced stress. Roadrunner, that's an interesting question. I'm going to end on this because it's time for me to go home, and I'm sorry if I didn't get any more questions. Because when you say it's self-induced stress, the thing that's so fascinating about that is you're absolutely right. You're 100% right. But at the same time, I mean, we are in like a budgetary crisis and will be for at least another 3 weeks. And I mean like a can't sleep at night crisis, and have been for months. So on one level, you can say that's external, and you're right. And on another level, you could say you are self-induced stress. David Booty says all stress is self-induced, and you're right about that too. So this last 3 months have been an exercise in me trying to talk myself down off of the ledge, and that's a skill set that comes along with the how to recognize the big black dog of depression is coming in, or any of the other issues that sometimes people face if they didn't get enough security or whatever when they were growing up as little kids. So, yes, it's self-induced, but at the same time, it's plenty real. I'm just learning how to say to myself, if there's nothing you can do about this, then there's nothing you can do about this. Work the problem, and there's no sense in panicking. But there's a great deal of joy in it. And on that note, I think I'll probably leave you for this evening. So this show's made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who continue to keep on keeping on. God bless them all. I believe I'm going to do a right angle this week. I didn't do one when we recorded on Tuesday, because I think I'm going to do a right angle this week specifically about the people that have been watching right angles for 10 years now. What I mean to say is these are specifically not the members. This is a message for specifically non-members, because the members couldn't ask for more than them. But 4 shows a week for 10 years. That's a fair amount of free content, and I'm going to basically just say, really could use the help right now. If you want to make a donation, this would be a real good time. We're trying to fight against forces that have $70 billion on the table, and I'll probably end up doing a little bit of rhetorical math. That's what I do. I don't have a great deal of math skill, but I know how to do rhetorical math. I know how to use math to make a point. So I'm going to do a rough estimate. We've done 4 shows a week. We've done 3 with an extended members-only show. But generally the average has been 4 shows a week for 9 years. And I'm going to figure out what that total comes to, which somebody can do very quickly. I just don't have my calculator available at the moment. And then I'm going to basically say, you know what, if you paid $100 for that, that would be 2.5 cents a show or something like that. You get the idea. Anyway, we're very grateful for our members, and all the rest of you can just go to pound sand in hell as far as I'm concerned. Nevertheless, that's what we're here for. So we're gonna stay here. I'll tell you one thing. This has been so bloody awful for me this last 3-4 months. It has really given me. It's just given me a much deeper appreciation for things. You know, things that I used to just take for granted. I just don't take for granted anymore. I suppose that's why the lesson is there. You know, the beatings will continue until morale improves, and they will also continue until you either wise up or and stop doing what you're doing, or not. So, yeah, it's got my undivided attention, and that's why I'm going to be cranking on script for the next 8 or 9 days, I guess, something like that. Got a lot of work to do, and a lot of distractions. Speaking of which, I just realized now I'm halfway through the notes on episode 6 of this thing, and they needed them by the end of the day today. So I've got another, I don't know, hour maybe of 2 hours of notes on Empire of Terror, episode 6. Putting a lot of notes in there, but the show is going to be spectacular. The main title sequence for Empire of Terror is the best title sequence I've ever seen on any show ever. It's absolutely breathtaking. Absolutely breathtaking. I love it. So anyway, let me get to that, and I'm sorry we missed last Monday. There's starting to look like a pretty good chance we're going to have to miss next Monday too, although I'm liking very much to be back on Thursday. Okay, Steve Whoop says, God's sake, hit save and then get some rest. I can't get some rest, and I don't have to hit save. I just have to hit stop recording. So I don't have to hit save. I just have to make sure I turn it on at the beginning. So I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they make as they go by. Doug Adams. Well, that's why Doug Adams was Doug Adams. Okay, kids, we're gonna do this in reverse alphabetical order. So we're going to say goodnight to our Twitch audience first. So thanks very much for joining us, and as always, and we will see you next week, I hope, for the Stress-Free Lounge, and we'll be talking to that guy back there, that big, tall, good-looking guy, somewhere around 3 weeks from now. Okay, so so long, Twitch, and we'll get this up on YouTube and all the rest of that. Okay, see you later. Bye. Stop recording. I'm still streaming, but I'm not recording. I'm going to let you guys on Twitch continue to... Oh, no, you can't hear me. It doesn't matter. Never mind. The sound went off when I went to the graphic. Okay, so now for those of you on YouTube, by the way, here's a super chat from Monk and Training. Is DW going to release Empire of Terror? The only reason I'm subscribed to them, and I'm considered dropping them. Yes, I think it's going to come out in November, Monk, and it looks like it's going to be fairly impressive, I think. All right, so we've gotten rid of those losers now, and so we just say to you, fine, high-quality YouTube viewers, and abusers. I guess we'll see you next time. Okay, so thanks for being here, and happy trails.